Why don't you go see your boyfriend?
Yeah, he got a nice room. You won't have it long. He left a call for 7 a.m.
Listen properly.
Can you please look up this site?
See if we can figure out something.
Hi guys, it is Monday, and I think this was the first weekend in more than a month that I didn't stream at all. So that was a bit weird. I also just want to say this tooth, that one, I think. I was eating pizza yesterday, of course, and I crunched down and I was like, there was something hard in the pizza. Swallowed and realized that something hard was the back of that tooth. So tomorrow is dentist day, but in the meantime, I have like a teeny little bit of, like, there's some words where my tongue hits there and it sounds weird. So in case you're wondering why I'm like, hello, my name is Vicky, it's because of my tongue. Okay, let's start at the top. Morning, Steve. Morning, Teresa. Morning, Psychosaurus Rex, who had a nightmare that she got banned from the chat forever. Well, if you behave. No, I'm joking. You would have to do something really bad to get banned. More afternoon, Lilith, because we're in the same time zone. Yeah, it was good to be off, but also I missed streaming a lot. Okay, let's just set this up quick so that we have tabs on when they're back. Okay, that works for now. I don't love it. Is this better? I actually think I'm going to stick with that one. However, you can't actually see. No. Let's take this off. Yeah, we'll just stick like that. I have a lot of work to get done, and when it's their lunch, like half an hour before their lunch, I need to drive about 20 minutes away because I'm going to a friend's screening tonight, and I need to leave at about 6:30. So I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to go about that just yet. Just going back a couple of seconds so that we can have the closed captions. But what we might have to do is take a break before and then quickly catch up after, so that we're not like an entire day behind. In the meantime, I've been going through old Judge Simpson videos that I saved, and I have some really cool stuff hidden in there. Like, it was at the point where he was removing them really fast, so I wasn't even watching. I was just saving. And it looks like there might be a few that I can put together like I did the subset. But even some like semi-trial feeling things. All information, details. I'm looking currently for July 9th. Because I haven't put out a normal video in a while. Really, like my brain really, oh, we do have that. And we have that. Oh, that's going to be fun. I completely forgot what I was saying. Hey, Welsh lady. Oh, there was a trial movement where cops were there and everything to testify. But I was so worried I didn't have the 9th of July because Mr. Heenan formatting your memory card at this time? Whew. Brave. Somebody didn't plan for space. Mr. Heenan, that was our drunk guy that I cried about, he had a hearing on 13th of June. And I was missing that one day. I do recommend Alyssa Perez, lady I linked in mod chat. Lilith, I actually think we've watched her on here before. I have already subscribed to her channel, and I've got a folder. So basically I have like a master folder that's called downloaded streams, which is where I've just like been stocking up on stuff. And I have a folder for her. So I must have watched her along the way. It's always like when we're looking for court hopping in general, I'm like looking for someone that doesn't have massive breaks. And so some of the awesome judges just, stop clicking. Sorry. I may have to start this on a different laptop. My mouse is stuck. Mayhem. This is absolutely less than ideal. Also, if you were here last week when the plug went pop, 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 the day that the plug had gone pop, 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 mouse stuck like Chuck. It literally is. Like, I wish I could show you guys what it's doing. No, don't leave, don't leave, don't leave. Okay, we're back. I literally got, no, it is stuck. Hey, Karen. Okay, friends, let me just focus for a second. I need to move you onto this other laptop so that I can restart Chrome. Otherwise, I'm going to cut the stream. Pet peeve when sites don't have login as like on the landing page when it's like get started or whatever. Put a login sign. I'm sorry if I miss any messages. I also caught up on Ashley Benefield over the weekend. And I believe her. I can almost say 100% believe her. Okay, it's probably going to switch to a weird mic, but we've got this. It'll be okay. Okay. I apologize in advance for the quality of the mic. I'm going to restart. You guys need to hang out with Phoebe for a second. Well, I'm here, but like, I'm here to the side. And I don't know if you can hear my audio. Anyway, that worked out quite well, because what I was gonna tell you is that after the popping plug, we got some seriously heavy duty what is that thing called? This an adapter that is surge protection, but it's like 12 way, so I can just have one adapter. I don't think it's Phoebe's tail. I think it's her head. It is her head. There's Winchester on that side too, but you can't quite see her. Also, after I showered and got dressed, I put my pajama pants back on because it is 8 degrees. Hey, Adam. Oh, that's what I was saying. The ballerina trial, I believe her 100,000%. And I am shocked that the prosecution didn't know where to draw the line. I think that the prosecution really did a number on themselves by letting her reach that point of like panic cry that just humanized her even more. Okay, I want to say mirror my camera. Hi, GHD hanging out in the background. I don't think it was a great idea at all. At all. But I was watching, I caught up on Lawyer You Know. That's where I was doing the recap. And then I also landed up watching this psychologist react. I'm not going to share because I felt like they didn't really react in a psychological way. It was more just like watching it. But I watched them do the reaction. And when she got upset, it made my stomach feel anxious, which for me is like, if I feel it physically, it's an easy way for me to know, like, I need to trust that, because my intuition kind of is a bit stronger. My brain can't trump my stomach or my gut saying something. You know what I mean? Like, I can not like someone, but they don't give me a bad feeling. And then I can be like, oh, okay, there's just something I don't like. But if they give me a bad feeling, then I will listen to that. I'm busy trying to make space to crawl under my desk to switch plugs over, since the mouse decided that I need a break. And it is a little bit terrifying, if I'm honest, because I'm really worried about it going pop, pop again, even though everything is turned off. This court seems to be late. Only 50 seconds behind, which is where we need to be in order to have closed captions. Like, do you think I'll ever run out of plugs? If all the surge secure plug lights are off when the wall socket is switched off, then switch on the wall socket. Well, I would imagine you need to have the socket on in order for the thing to work. That would be logical. How crazy is this, though? This plug point comes with a warranty that if something goes wrong and there's a fire, they will pay out that amount. I wish the last one had, because I feel like I need to add extra psychologist days. I would love to know what the size of this office looks like to Phoebe, not now, to the Americans watching, because it must be like a closet. I would put on something in the meantime, but I haven't got... Oh, Vicky Mac, you silly sausage. I won't even be able to hear if the court comes back, because I have it. These are connected to my laptop. Can you guys hear Vaughn talking? Because if you can, that's a problem for me. I hear a cat. Yes, it's Phoebe trying to get out the room at this very bad timing time, because I'm not using my USB mic. So if I open the door, there's a chance that we hear you and cats. Okay, not Vaughn. Vaughn's on a work call. So if I open the door with the mic not muted, then his work call stuff is going to be on YouTube, and I can't do that. That's not allowed. Okay, so if I move that to there and that to there, I should actually have asked Vaughn for like 5,000 other, because he ordered these. I should have asked him to order like just a bunch of them, like as many as possible. Eileen, Vicky, I ran down the URL for that picture I asked you about this morning. I'll send it later. You asked me for a picture. Was it on Instagram? Because I haven't actually opened Instagram. This whole weekend, I just didn't, I was like off. You can ask the mods, I didn't even reply to them. I was just struggling to keep up. Eileen, I don't see anything from you. Where did you ask in a comment? You know, I haven't even opened YouTube Studio today. There were people arguing over that veteran video in YouTube Studio yesterday, so Eileen, just let me know where to look. I was also thinking about the Mika Miller thing. And there is a story that was a pic supposed to be of his honor that I think looks nothing like him. Yeah, when you get a chance to send it, if you sent a link in the chat, it would immediately be removed for spam. Phoebe Jane, can you just stay here? Come here, little one. Phoebe, come say hi to the camera. Because when you leave streams running, then you know those "you're a winner," they tend to come flying in. Come say hello to the camera. Hi. You're very cute. And I love the purring on my head. There was actually a story of a guy who broke his leg and his cat lay on the leg and purred. And he had like record-breaking recovery time. So whenever I'm feeling a little bit like not great in the head, I lie on one of the cats and let them purr into my brain cells. I really need this court to start so that Phoebe, so that I can mute. Steve, the problem is that I'm actually wanting to crawl under the desk. March 3, 2018 Chronicle. Eileen, was that about the intern thing? Because I watched the hearing on that over the weekend. Excuse me. Yeah, I watched the hearing on the High Court, and I watched the interview with the lady, and I watched like a minute of the body cam, and like knowing Judge Simpson and watching so much of his court, I have no doubt that it was blown incredibly out of proportion. I do feel like the woman is a little problematic, but I can't say beyond a reasonable doubt that she is. I'm going to move you guys over a little. Okay, hang tight. If you have motion sickness, don't look now. Okay. Now you can see Winchester and not my butt. Oh my goodness gracious. I just want to get my desk to the point where I can go back to my normal computer so that everything is back to normal. So bear with me, please. Surge protection, surge protection. Are you going to help me, Phoebe? Thank you, that's very kind. Can't say that's what I need help with, though. Oh my goodness. Nearly there. Oh dear. Oopsie. It helps to turn the plug on. Okay. Phew. That is so much better. Phoebe Jane, give me 1 minute. Let me get this computer on so that I can move back to the right mic and it'll be happy days. And goal this time is, oh, there goes my earphones. Goal this time is not to break anything or drop anything or have anything explode. Okay. Whew. Right, hang tight. I'm going to mute you a sec. Okay. Whew. Here I am. Court isn't here yet. That is strange. Why are they so late? This was not the plan. Connect. There we go. Do I look really blurry? No, not too bad. But Winchester's cut off a bit. There we go. Goodness gracious. I don't know why that was stressful. Okay. Let me just open for this cat. Oh, Swinge is just so cute. I must say, the stream of Vicky just plugging things in and interacting with her cats is amazing. Thanks, Lilith. It didn't feel that way. It felt so chaotic. Like, super chaotic. And YouTube Studios in a weird space. I hope it didn't just turn on the heart. No. Okay. Come on, Court. I got things to do. I've got 3 hours until I have to leave. My hair looks incredibly ginger today. Oh, this is getting a bit ridiculous. Let's watch something in the meantime. Oh, I think they're starting in 4 minutes.
Will be set for
September 3rd at 1:30 before Judge Conkey, I'm sorry.
September 3rd.
Yes.
September 3rd, 2024, 1:30. Bond continued.
Good point, Lilith. How weird was that zoom in on
Court does call the case, People versus Robert
the guard?
Droszewski.
On behalf of the people.
Written on behalf of Mr. Droszewski. Name for the record.
Droszewski, Robert. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
Not well, sir.
This is another matter in which we do not yet have an updated report.
Do not yet have the report, you mean?
Why am I being denied an attorney? Why is an attorney coming to see me?
Hold on.
Your Honor.
Hold on a second.
Yes, please. Yes, sir.
So
Sorry.
we're looking,
Apologies.
you're looking for a report on this case.
Yes.
And we don't have it yet. Did both cases get referred over or just one?
I see that the 1052 is competency. The 1188 appears to be a bond violation.
Got it. Okay, so because that one's set for just a straight PCC, is
That is correct. Your Honor. 1:30 was just.
all right. We haven't heard anything from,
All
right, what was our dates?
I told him that I'm willing to cooperate.
All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. September 26, 2024 at 9 a.m. I will move the date up. To keep them together, I would also set this case for PCC that date, but move it up, or what do you want me to do on that?
So he has not even yet been spoken to by CMH. So
Pardon?
he's not even had the interview yet with CMH. So I'm gonna keep that in mind.
Okay.
Your Honor. Good morning,
Yes.
sir.
Yes,
I've been
sir.
just so you know, I've been requesting to speak with someone, and I've sent numerous letters. I've called the public defender's office to talk to an attorney about questions I have relating to this competency, why it was even ordered in the first place. I've requested copies of the motions as to why I was even sent a motion to have me for a competency, and no one's answering me, no one's talking to me. And personally, I don't even believe that I should be going to forensics, sir. I mean, if there's a hearing that we can have, that a lawyer can talk to me. I've been trying to talk to a lawyer for 5 months now, and I've been rejected every time. I've been laughed at in my face by other attorneys when they've seen me in the courtroom about this violation for talking to my girl on the phone. They literally laughed in my face when I asked them questions. The lawyer who asked me, who put in the motion for competency, when I asked him about evidence in the case, his exact words to me, Your Honor, were, quote, "I am not going to do anything you ask me to do," unquote. And I had some choice words for him. We came into the court. He filed a motion for competency against me. Why am I sitting here 5 months
No, it's
later?
not, sir. It's,
I mean, I understand, Your Honor.
I was not part of the conversation, but I would say that, first of all, a competency is not filed against you.
I understand that, sir.
Okay, so
But why am I being denied an opportunity to speak to a lawyer about the competency issue and about the motion in the first place? They're telling me that they can't even talk to me.
I don't think that they would have said that.
Your Honor,
They
I've called the
can't.
public defender,
Okay.
pardon my interruption.
Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I'm sorry, sir.
What were you gonna say? Go ahead.
I've called the public defender's office 3 times. They've told me that no lawyer will talk to me. I've sent 4 or 5 letters to the public defender's office requesting to talk to an attorney specifically about this competency motion and examination that I had questions, and no one responds to me.
Okay, so Mr. Brown, I'm gonna set these dates. You'll make sure that
We'll
somebody
make
gets
sure
down
that-
and talks to him about this.
Absolutely.
So he has an understanding as to why it's proceeding in that way.
Absolutely. We will make.
All
sure
right.
this communication-
So I'm setting it for the 26th. And then September 26th, 9 AM, that date, so that you understand, sir, if we get a report, like if we talk to you, we get a report, that date gets moved up. So things will happen a lot faster once that occurs. Got
I
it?
appreciate you, Your Honor, and I'm not trying to be difficult. I've
No,
been laying up here for 5 months and I'm
Sir, sir.
frustrated.
Sir, I'm not thinking that you're trying to be difficult. You had some questions. Some of them I can't answer.
Yes, sir. Your Honor.
Okay, so what I've asked Mr. Brown is to make sure that somebody gets down and talks to you, kind of explain this whole process.
Thank you, sir.
All right?
I was wondering if you could tell me what the status of his phone privileges are.
Alexander's all I know.
Status of his phone privileges?
Name when I got up and left. That's
I do
Alexander.
not see an order. Yes, I do. On case. Right. I don't have my date, on June 21st, 2024, his phone privileges were revoked pending a hearing.
Okay. I will reach,
Sorry, I just want to hear
His
that
phone
date.
privileges, I don't have my date, on June 21st, 2024, his phone privileges were revoked pending a hearing.
okay. I will reach back out to the jail and make sure that they're in that order. My understanding is that his calls were continuing to the victim through at least June 26th. So I'm concerned.
Well, let me put it this way. I signed the order from June 21st. I can see that it was stamped in June 24th. And I would suspect that the jail has done something only because then we're talking 2 days later.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
all right, Bond will continue. Thank you. Close case.
Commonwealth versus Christine Ricci. Ms. Ricci is present. Counsel, please state your name for the record. We can start with the Commonwealth.
Good morning, Your Honor. Jeremy Cusman for the Commonwealth.
Good morning.
Shannon Buckingham for the Commonwealth. Good morning.
Jason Ron for the Commonwealth, good morning. Joshua Wood for Christine Ritchie.
Good morning, Your Honor. Maura Berry for Ms. Ritchie. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, everyone. Can I see counsel at the side of the bench, please? Just give me a minute to find that.
Okay, I'm gonna skip a little till we catch up
Oh, Your
where I
Honor,
can.
Yes,
could we be heard again at sidebar, just briefly, not about that issue, but about maybe a related issue that we might be able to take advantage of?
Okay, we need to be a couple of seconds behind. Okie dokie, time to focus.
Oh, and the order that the defense requested, I'm going to sign that right now.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Also, LaRosa. Ms. Juris.
Court are advised you're re-entering.
Hey, 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 all persons have anything to do for this honorable justice. Diane Ferdinand, Justice of the Superior Court, now sitting in the County of Plymouth. Draw near, give your attendance, you shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This honorable court is now in session. Please be seated.
Good morning, Your Honor. May I proceed? Good morning, everyone. Before the court is a continuation of the jury trial in the matter Commonwealth versus Christine Ricci. Ms. Ricci is present and is represented by attorneys Joshua Wood and Maura Barry. The Commonwealth is represented by Assistant District Attorneys Jeremy Kussman, Shannon Buckingham, and Jason Haran.
Good morning, jurors.
Good morning.
Jurors, I hope you had an excellent weekend and got to enjoy some of the beautiful weather that we had over the weekend. We'll start today with your responses to the 3 questions. Jurors, were you able to comply with my order that you not do any research about this case?
Yes.
Were you able to comply with my order that you not speak to anyone about this case?
Yes.
And do you all still have open minds?
Yes.
With those 3 answers, everyone answering in the affirmative, we're ready to start today's work. Jurors, one of your fellow jurors has been excused from service and will not participate further in this case. You shouldn't speculate as to the reason that juror number 14 is no longer present. The reason for the juror's discharge was entirely personal. It's unrelated to this case or her views on the case or her relationship to her fellow jurors. In fact, I have no idea what her views were on the case or even whether she actually had any views about the case. I give you that information because undoubtedly you recognized this morning that one among you was not with you. So we're ready to begin today's work. The Commonwealth may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Commonwealth calls Maureen Harnett, please.
Yes, thank you.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury, spelling your last name for the record?
Maureen Hartnett. The last name is Hartnett.
Where are you currently employed?
I am a forensic scientist too at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory in the Criminalistics Unit.
How long have you been with the Massachusetts State Police?
I was originally hired in 2004, and I worked from 2004 to 2007 in both the CODIS unit and the Criminalistics Unit. And then I was most recently hired again in 2019 into the Criminalistics Unit.
And how long have you been a forensic scientist too for?
Approximately 4.5 years.
How long were you a forensic scientist 1 for?
Approximately 9 months.
Okay. And your title is what's your title?
Forensic scientist too.
Okay. And what are your duties and responsibilities as a forensic scientist in the criminalistics unit?
I examine various items of evidence submitted by law enforcement agencies as well as internal crime scene responders for the presence of body fluids such as blood, semen, and saliva. I also do trace identification and damage analysis.
And what training did you receive at the lab?
I received approximately 9 months of training that was broken up into modules, each module addressing a different type of analysis that we would do in the unit. At the end of each module, I took a written exam, an oral exam, and a hands-on practical exam. Once I completed all the modules, I was given a mock case to process as normal casework.
And what is your educational background?
I have a bachelor's degree in biology from Bridgewater State University and a master's degree in forensic science from the University of New Haven.
And outside of your formal education, what training have you received in the field of criminalistics?
In addition to the training, which I just spoke about, the 9-month training in-house at the State Police Crime Laboratory, I also received a 40-hour blood stain pattern analysis class. I took an ethics workshop and also a workshop on cognitive bias.
And what, if any, continuing education do you do? Excuse me.
As part of our accreditation, we are required to do continuing education every year, which may consist of learning a new technique or reading various articles in the field of forensics.
And who is the lab accredited by?
Our lab is accredited by ANSI, National Accreditation Board.
And you participated in competency and proficiency tests?
Yes, I do.
Most recently, what was the result of your rounds of competency testing, excuse me?
Successfully completed my most recent rounds of proficiency testing.
Okay. Now, you indicated that you're part of the crime response team.
Yes, I'm also a member of the crime scene response unit.
And how long have you been part of that?
Upon hire in 2019.
Okay. How many crime scenes have you responded to?
I would say approximately 200.
And when you respond to crime scenes, what's your usual role, typical role?
When I respond to crime scenes, I'll test various items of evidence. Again, for body fluids, I will collect various items, including weapons, clothing, and any other items that may contain forensic value.
And how many criminalistic cases have you been assigned or participated in, ma'am?
I believe approximately 1,000.
How are cases assigned to you?
Cases are assigned to me through my supervisor.
And once a case is assigned to you, what do you do?
Once a case is assigned to me, I will read over any reports that come along with the case, including police reports, medical examiner reports, crime scene reports if those have been written. And then I decide what items are going to be potentially most forensically relevant to examine.
Now, once you make that determination, what's the next step you do?
The next step is I prepare my lab area for examining the evidence. I bleach down my bench top with a 10% bleach solution, in addition to any reusable utensils that I'll use. And I also have various disposable utensils that I will prepare for examining the evidence.
And what's the purpose of that?
To prevent contamination.
Now, what steps do you take in processing an item of evidence?
So once my bench area is ready and I am put on my appropriate lab coat, gloves, and mask, I will retrieve the item of evidence from our cold storage unit. We have a computer electronic tracking system for every item of evidence within the lab. So once I put that evidence into my custody, I will scan it using the barcode on the package and scan it against the barcode that I have been assigned so that the computer system is aware that I now can have custody of that item.
Now, once that is completed, what do you do next?
I photograph all the packaging to ensure that it was properly sealed. I then will photograph each item of evidence, front, back, interior, and exterior.
And do you once you complete that, what do you do next?
Depending on what the purpose of the examination is, I'll most likely be looking for any staining on the item, looking for trace materials on the item, and decide what type of testing will be done.
Okay. And what is a screening test?
A screening test is an initial test on a biological fluid. For example, a blood screening test will indicate whether or not blood may be present in that sample. And if there's a positive screening test, I will do a confirmatory test to confirm whether or not that stain is actually blood.
And what is it, just very briefly, what does a confirmatory test do?
A confirmatory test will determine whether or not the stain is blood.
And what do you specifically use? What does that look like?
So the screening test, I take something similar to a cotton swab, like a Q-tip. I rub it on the stain. I add 2 chemicals to that cotton swab. If it turns pink, it's considered a positive screening test. If the screening test is positive, then I'll then perform a confirmatory test where I either take a swabbing or a cutting from that stain. I put it in a buffer, which is just a liquid to extract the stain from the item. That liquid is then loaded into a test card. It's something similar to a COVID test if you've done that. So you spot that liquid at the beginning of the card in the well. The liquid would travel up the strip. If it's 2 lines, it's positive. If there's 1 line, it's negative.
So, Ms. Harnett, what happens when it tests positive?
If the confirmatory test is positive, I'll prepare a sample for DNA.
And what happens if it's negative?
Generally, I don't prepare a sample at that point.
So that for that particular item, it's concluded?
For that particular stain, there'd be no further testing.
What is QLIM and what does quantity limited indicate?
QLIM is a term that we use at the lab to indicate that the stain or the item being sent forward to DNA is not large enough to divide into 2 samples. Typically, when we collect a sample, we preserve half of that stain or sample for further testing. If the stain or sample is too small for a variety of reasons, we will then deem it QLIM, which means quantity limited, and that entire sample will be used up during DNA analysis.
And QLIM is QLIM?
Yes, that's correct.
How are samples prepared for further analysis?
Depending on what the substrate the sample is on, if it's fabric or a hard surface. If it's a fabric, I will cut a sample, place it into a plastic tube and seal it properly to send off to the DNA unit. If it is a hard surface, I will take a swabbing of the stain, preserve it in a similar fashion. I'll put it in a plastic tube, which is then properly sealed and sent forward to DNA.
And how are samples chosen for DNA analysis?
Samples are chosen on what potentially will have the most forensic relevance.
And who chooses? Who makes that decision?
I make that decision.
And once you make that decision, what happens next?
The samples are sent forward to DNA.
Okay. Now, I'd like to direct your attention to this lab number, in this case, lab number 21-02063. What was your role in this matter, Ms. Harnett?
I processed the evidence in the criminalistics unit for this case.
Okay. And do you recall who you received the evidence from?
The clothing items I received from our crime scene responder, Amy Joy, or she submitted them into the laboratory. The 2 other items, the knives, were submitted by Trooper Thomas Laughran, and he submitted to the crime laboratory.
Now, once these items are submitted to the crime laboratory and you obtain them, what do you do with them first?
First, they will be scanned into my custody so that the laboratory understands that they're in my custody and I have control over them.
Okay. Now, what items did you perform a general test on in this case?
I examined item 1-3, which is a knife, item 1-4, which is a knife. I also examined clothing of Christine Ricci, which consisted of a shirt, a sweatshirt, a pair of shoes, and a pair of pants.
And when you receive those items, are they already labeled? Do you label them? What happens?
They are already labeled upon receipt.
All right. I want to focus on the knife the first knife 1-3.
Okay.
When you obtained that item, what did you do with it?
I scanned it into my custody. I photographed the packaging and as well as photographed the item.
Okay. Do you observe the item?
Yes. Once that's completed, I make any visual observations of that item.
And when you made visual observations of this item 1-3, what did you see?
I saw a red-brown stain on the blade of the knife, and I also saw trace materials in the serrated portion of the knife.
Why don't we do it now? Sure. We can do it now. Can we pause around very briefly?
Yes. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Can you two photographs? Sorry, do you recognize those photographs?
Yes, I do.
What is depicted in those photographs?
These are photographs of item 1-3, which was a steak knife.
And do those photographs actually depict that steak knife 1-3?
Yes.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
I will move these items into evidence exhibit. The next exhibit.
No objection.
All right. We've been going one by one, so I'm actually going to keep that theme going, and we'll mark those as Exhibit 20 and 21.
Thank you.
Exhibits 20 and 21 so marked.
Thank you.
Upon visual inspection of that knife 1-3, what did you see?
I saw red-brown staining on the blade of the knife. I also saw trace materials within the serrated portion of the knife.
Okay. And that trace material, if you can only refer to it as trace material, where was that located on the knife?
It was in the serrated cutting portion of the knife.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
And your note photo. You recognize what is depicted in that photo?
Yes, I do.
What is depicted in that photo?
This is a close-up of a portion of the blade of the knife.
And does that accurately depict the blade of the knife on 1-3?
Yes.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
I will move this item to evidence.
I would ask for my objection to be noted based on the.
Your objection is noted. The close-up of the serrated portion, cutting portion of the knife will be marked as Exhibit 22.
Your Honor, if I may publish number 20 and 21 exhibits to the jury.
Sure.
Mr. Harding, if I may direct your attention to the big screen, exhibit number 20. Can you point out for the jury, if you can see, where the red-brown stain was located?
Sure. Do you want me just to get up?
You may get up.
So there was red-brown staining along the front portion of the blade. I can see it here.
All right, thank you. Now, if I may publish exhibit number 22, Your Honor.
You may.
Ms. Harnett, what is the exhibit number 22 display?
This is a close-up of that blade.
And can you point out the red-brown stain that you observed?
Yes. This photo was taken under the microscope and with the red-brown stains on the blade of the knife.
And that's at the bottom left of the photograph?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, after you observed those red-brown stains, what did you do?
I performed a screening test on those red-brown stains as well as a confirmatory test.
Your Honor, the witness may be seated.
She may be seated.
Now, when you performed the red-brown stains, a screening test on the red-brown stain, what was the result?
The screening test was positive.
And then upon receiving that positive on the screening test of the red-brown stains, what did you do next?
I performed a confirmatory test on those stains.
Okay. And how did you perform a confirmatory test?
I took a swabbing of the stains. I cut a portion of the swab, put it into a tube, added the solution to the tube, which is a liquid buffer to extract the stain from that swab. And then that liquid is spotted into the test card, as I described earlier, and flowed up the strip of the test card. The resulting card showed 2 lines, which is a positive result.
And did you label that stain? A sample of it, was it labeled?
The sample that I took, yes, was labeled.
And what was that labeled as?
That was labeled, I believe, 1-3.2.1.
Was it labeled also with a letter?
Yes.
What was it called?
I designated it as stain A on the knife.
And that was a knife that was located on the dining room floor
Yes, correct.
of the home.
Yes.
In regards to that item, once the blood confirmatory was confirmed as blood, what did you do with it?
I preserved the sample to send forward to DNA.
Is there anything else that you did with that item?
I also collected the trace material from the item, and I also took a sample from the handle of the item for possible skin cell recovery.
And in regards to the skin cell of the item from the handle, what would you do with that?
That sample is sent forward to DNA. I don't do any testing for skin cells. It's just a sample that's taken and sent forward.
All right. Now, I want to discuss with you item 1-4. Okay. What was that item?
Item 1-4 was a chopping knife.
And where was that located?
I believe it was located on the dining room table of the home.
And when you received that item, what did you do with it?
I scanned it into my custody. I took a photograph of the exterior packaging as well as a photograph of the knife itself.
And have you had the opportunity to review photographs of that knife?
Yes, I have.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
I need 2 photographs. Ms. Harnett, do you recognize what is depicted in those photographs?
Yes, I do.
What is depicted in those photographs?
These are the overall photographs of item 1-4, which is a knife.
And did those photographs accurately depict item 1-4 that you received in this matter?
Yes.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Almost moves these items of evidence.
Is there an objection?
No objection to these.
How many are there?
2, Your Honor.
So they'll be marked in a minute as Exhibit 23 and 24.
May I publish Exhibit 24, Your Honor?
You may.
Ms. Harnett, direct your attention to the big screen exhibit number 24. What did you, when you did a visual observation of this knife, what did you see?
Upon my first observation, I noted that there was a dark stain on the tip of the knife.
And when you observed that dark stain on the tip of the knife, what did you do?
I then put it under the microscope so I could get a clearer picture of what it looked like.
And did you take photographs of the tip of the knife with a clearer picture?
Yes, I did.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Need 2 more photographs. You recognize what is depicted in those photographs?
Yes, I do.
What is depicted on those photographs?
These are the close-ups of photos taken with the microscope of the blade of that knife and some of the staining on that knife.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Actually, before I do that, did those photographs accurately depict the knife that you observed?
Yes, they do.
Are they, what is depicted on the knife that you had?
Yes, they do.
Renew my objection, Your Honor, for the record.
He's renewing his objection for the record. Note your objection, exhibits 25 and 26, the close-ups of 1.4 are marked in a minute into evidence.
25 and 26.
You're right.
May I publish exhibit number 25?
You may.
Ms. Harnett, if I can direct your attention to the big screen TV exhibit number 25. If the witness may be removed from the stand to point out.
She may.
You testified there indicated that there was red-brown stains. Can you point to the jury?
Yes. So these are the red brown stains that I observed on the serrated portion of the knife once I looked at it under the microscope.
And once you observed those red-brown stains, what'd you do?
Once I observed those red brown stains, I performed a screening test on those.
And what was the result of the screening test?
The screening test was positive.
Please be seated. After you received a positive screening test on that item, what'd you do next?
I collected a sample for that item. I did not run a confirmatory test on that particular stain due to the sizing of the stains.
So no confirmatory test was conducted.
Correct.
And how come?
I decided that that stain would most likely be Q-lim, quantity limited, given the small size of the red brown stains. Anytime you perform a test, such as a confirmatory test, you are using up some of the sample to do so. So in this case, I chose not to use up that sample for the confirmatory test and send it forward for DNA.
So even though you couldn't do a confirmatory test, you sent it further for additional testing. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
And the reason you didn't do that confirmatory test is because it was too small.
Yes, in my opinion, it was too small. It potentially would use up too much of the material in order to run a DNA sample later.
Now, what else did you do in regards to the item number 1-4?
I also collected the trace material from the blade of the knife, as well as a swab from the handle of the knife for potential skin cell recovery.
And once you did that, what happened next?
Those samples were properly packaged and sent forward for DNA.
Now, I want to direct your attention to item 3-10. What's that item?
Item 3-10 was a shirt. It was noted as belonging to Christine Ricci.
And once you received that shirt, what'd you do with it?
I photographed the exterior packaging, and then I photographed the item itself, the front, the back, and the interior front and back.
And after you photographed the t-shirt, what'd you do?
I made my visual observations of the shirt, which included a red-brown stain on the front of the shirt.
May I approach?
You may.
I need one photograph. Ms. Harnett, do you recognize what is depicted in that photograph?
Yes, I do.
What is depicted in that photograph?
This is a photograph of the front of item 3-10, which is a t-shirt.
Does that photograph accurately depict the front of that 3-10 t-shirt?
Yes, it does.
I post the witness.
You may.
Almost moves into evidence as next exhibit.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
It'll be marked as exhibit and admitted into evidence as exhibit 27, photo of the front of the sweatshirt.
May I publish this to the jury?
You may.
Ms. Harnett, you indicated that you did a visual observation of this t-shirt.
Yes, that's correct.
And what was the result?
I noted a red-brown stain on the front of the t-shirt.
Can you please point to that red-brown stain that you observed?
Yes, may I?
You may.
The red-brown stain is in the upper left area of the t-shirt.
Upper left when you're wearing the t-shirt.
Yes, correct.
And in regards to the photograph, it's upper right.
It's upper, yeah, yes, my apologies. So it's upper right on the photograph. If you were wearing the shirt, it would be the upper left.
Thank you. And you had the opportunity to take additional photographs of that area.
Yes, I did.
May I post the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
And you took photographs. You recognize what is depicted in those photographs?
Yes, I do.
What?
These are close-up photographs of that stain on the front of the shirt.
Does that up-close photographs accurately depict the stain on the t-shirt?
Yes, it does.
May I post the witness?
You may.
I'll move these items to evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
They will be marked and admitted into evidence as exhibits 28 and 29.
Exhibits 28 and 29, so marked.
Thank you.
And did you entitle that, what'd you do with that stain?
So that's that stain I screened, excuse me, I performed a screening test for blood on that stain as well as a confirmatory test for blood.
Okay. And that was a sample of stain A?
Yes, correct. I designated it as stain A for reporting purposes.
And what was the result of the blood screening?
The screening test was positive.
And thus you went to the blood conformatory on this case?
Yes.
In this one?
Excuse me, yes, that's correct.
And what was the result of that?
That test was also positive.
And once you received the positive on blood confirmatory test, what'd you do next?
I took a cutting of that stain to send it forward for DNA.
Okay. What else did you do in regards to item item 3-10?
I believe I collected trace materials from that item as well.
Okay. Once your examination of the items was completed, what'd you do?
I prepared a technical report of my analysis.
Okay. And is that report admin and technically reviewed?
Yes, my report is always technically reviewed by a peer in my unit as well as administratively reviewed.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
You may.
So in regards to the trace material, was that submitted for further testing?
No, it was not.
How come?
When a forensic link has been made using a biological fluid, per our item analysis policy, trace material is not typically examined unless specifically requested.
Thank you, ma'am. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-exam.
With regard to the trace materials, you mean specifically requested by like the Commonwealth?
It can be requested by the Commonwealth or as well as the defense.
Or someone at your lab?
Yes, that's correct. If there's a forensic relevance to that trace material, that would provide an additional answer than has already been provided with the biological.
So in other words, if this material looks like it's going to answer no questions, you don't have it tested.
If it's not going to answer additional questions, correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Any redirect?
No, thank you.
The witness may step down.
Thank you.
Commonwealth may call its next witness.
Megan Little, please.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury, spelling your last name for the record?
Yes, my name is Megan Little, Little.
And where are you employed, ma'am?
I am employed at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory
How long have you been employed there?
for 5 years.
In what capacity are you employed as?
I am a forensic scientist too in the DNA unit.
And can you briefly describe your educational background?
Yes, I have a bachelor's of science in biochemistry from the University of Maine and a master's of science in forensic science from Marshall University.
And can you just very briefly describe the nature of your work at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab?
Yes, I process evidence samples, analyze results, perform comparisons as necessary, and issue reports.
And do you have any specialized training?
Yes, upon being hired at the crime lab, I underwent a training program that includes processing mock evidence samples, lectures, written exams, and at the completion of that, I took a competency test.
And what was the results of your most recent competency proficiency exams?
I've passed all my competency and proficiency tests.
Approximately how many samples have you performed DNA analysis on at the lab?
Over 500.
And can you just very briefly describe the DNA process?
Yes, so we take samples through a 4-step process. The first step is extraction, where we break open the cells and isolate the DNA. The second step is quantification, where we determine how much DNA is present in a sample. The third step is amplification, where we target specific areas of the DNA and make many copies of them. And then during the last step, those different copies are detected. I then look at the data on a computer and determine the DNA profile.
And in reference to this case, which is lab number 21-02063, was a known standard submitted to your lab for analysis?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know where the known standard came from?
It was a saliva standard from Christine Ricci.
And once you obtained that saliva standard from Christine Ricci, what'd you do with it?
So it went through that 4-step process. I then looked at the data on my computer and determined her DNA profile from that sample.
Okay. And what were the results of your testing?
I generated a single source DNA profile that could be used for a standard from Christine Ricci for comparison purposes.
Okay. And what happens after you generate a profile?
My work is done. My file is submitted for technical and administrative review. And then upon my file's closing, that profile can be used by whichever analyst is doing the analysis on the questioned items.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes?
Nothing further. Thank you, ma'am.
Any
questions.
The witness may step down. Thank you very much. The Commonwealth may call its next witness.
Yes, please. Commonwealth calls Lindsay Bird, please.
You solemnly swear the testimony and the evidence which you report in the jury that are now coming to the Commonwealth and as far as the truth, both of them, the peace of God. I do. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury, spelling your last name for the record?
My name is Lindsay Bird, and Bird is spelled B-I-R-D.
And where are you employed?
I'm a forensic scientist for the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab in the DNA unit.
And how long have you been with the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab?
Just over 12 years.
And have you been with the DNA unit that whole time?
I have.
What is your current capacity?
I'm a forensic scientist 3 within the DNA unit, which is a supervisory role over other forensic scientists doing day-to-day casework, and I'm also in charge of quality control for the DNA unit.
What is the duties and responsibilities of a forensic scientist 3?
So we assign and review casework from other analysts and do casework ourselves. And in my capacity as a quality control supervisor, I also ensure that the instrumentation and the reagents that we're using are all meeting our standards before we use them.
When did you become a forensic scientist number 3?
2 years ago.
And how long were you a forensic scientist number 2 for?
9 years. And then the first year I was a forensic scientist 1, which is a designation given to trainees.
What's your educational background, ma'am?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Microbiology from the University of New Hampshire, a Master of Science in Microbiology from the University of Hawaii, and a Master of Science in Forensic Science from the University of New Haven.
And do you have any specialized training in DNA?
I have.
That.
Prior to performing any casework, I was required to attend a training academy of sorts at the State Police Crime Lab that lasted for a period of about 1 year in order to meet the FBI's requirements to perform casework. And that included a literature review, working on mock cases and samples, observing, demonstrating all of our procedures, written and practical exams, and then it culminated in a final competency test.
And do you have any additional laboratory experience prior to working at the lab?
Prior to my position as a forensic scientist, I worked in the same unit as a contract employee where I did quality control tasks and research projects and functioned as a send-out technician.
And do you continue to do continuing education?
I do. We're required to do 8 hours of continuing education at a minimum per year.
Now you mentioned competency tests. Did you just mention that?
I did.
And proficiency tests. What were your results most recently in those tests?
I have taken and passed all of them.
Now, how many samples have you performed a DNA analysis on in the lab?
At this point, well over 3,000.
And how many DNA cases have you done a comparative analysis on? If you know,
I don't know.
Is it
in the hundreds?
Hundreds. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I want to direct your attention to this matter, which is lab number 21-02063. What was your role, ma'am?
For this case, I did data analysis and DNA interpretation for 4 items that were submitted to the DNA unit for DNA testing.
And what happens when you receive those items?
So we have a 4-step process that we do for all of our samples in the lab, and those samples are received from the criminalistics unit, and they undergo that 4-step process. And at the end, the data is interpreted and reported in DNA testing reports.
So what do you do?
For this case, I can do all of it. But for this case, I only did I picked up where the data started. So once the lab work was complete, it was given to me to do the data interpretation and write the reports.
So you received the known DNA profile of Christine Ricci from Megan Little.
Correct.
And then you also received the YSTR profile of Michael Ricci generated by Madeline Richardson.
Correct.
And you also received the STR profile of Michael Ricci generated by Madison Frank.
That's correct.
So that's when you pick up your work.
Correct.
Okay. How do you do an interpretation of those DNA items?
So my interpretation begins with the evidence items, the questioned items, but we are trying to answer the question of who may have left this behind. So I will look at the items of evidence first, the profiles generated from them, interpret how many individuals they might be from, if they are interpretable, if there is a profile there to compare to, and then I can do a comparison to any of the known standards that we have submitted with the case.
So you received 4 items in total that you examined?
Correct.
Okay. And you take the question items and compare them to those 3 DNA samples?
Correct, if they are comparable, yes.
Okay. So I want to direct your attention to item 1-3.
Your Honor, may I refer to my report?
You may.
Thank you.
What was that?
So I looked at the profile for item 1-3.2.1, which was described as a sample of stain A on the blade of the knife recovered from the dining room floor at 679 Moraine Street.
And what did you obtain from that item?
For item 1-3.2.1, The result was a male STR DNA profile was obtained.
And what does that mean?
It means that the profile generated from that location on that item produced a profile that appeared to be from one individual.
And Ms. Bird, what is a contributor?
So DNA profiles can be from one person, and we would call that a single source profile, meaning the data indicates that it was deposited by one person. So one contributor, one person contributed this DNA to this place. Other profiles can be a mixture of more than one person's profile. So we can see that there may be 2, 3, 4 people contributing to that mixture profile, and then those would have more than one contributor contributing biological material to that location.
How many contributors were assumed on this matter, on this item?
This item was consuming one contributor.
Now, in regards to determining that, what did you do after?
Once I determined that, I did a comparison to the known standards that were available for the case.
And can you describe to the jury what you did, please?
So I compared that STR DNA profile from item 1-3.2.1 to the known profile from Michael Ricci and to the known profile from Christine Ricci.
In regards to Michael Ricci, what was the result?
The result was that the DNA profile from this item was at least 9.1 nonillion times more likely if the profile originated from Michael Ricci than if it originated from an unknown individual unrelated to Michael Ricci. And this provides support for an inclusion.
What is inclusion?
So that means that when the evidence profile was compared to the known profile, they were found to be consistent. And then some statistical weight was applied to what that consistency means.
And that was 9.1 nonillion?
Correct.
Do you know how many zeros that is?
A nonillion is a 1 with 30 zeros after it.
And what did you do after determining Michael Ricci or using Michael Ricci's profile?
I then also did a comparison to Christine Ricci to the same profile.
And what was the result of that, ma'am?
That Christine Ricci is excluded from that DNA profile.
And what does excluded mean?
It means that when compared, the known standard profile taken from Christine Ricci is not consistent with the profile recovered from this item.
Okay. Now, anything else did you do with that item?
No.
Now, items, what were the next 2 items that you tested?
The next 2 items, the next 2 items that I interpreted were item 1-3.3.1, which is a sample from a handle of a knife recovered from the dining room floor at 679 Marine Street, and item 1-4.3.1, which was a sample taken from the handle of a knife recovered from the dining room table at 679 Marine Street.
What was the result of that?
For both of those items, the DNA profile is a mixture that is not suitable for comparison due to the quality of the profile.
And what does that mean?
It means that the recovered profile, while we could see it and there was a lot of information there, it was too low level and too complex to do anything with it. I could not compare it to anyone's known standard or do anything further with it.
Thank you. And then finally, item 3-10. What is that item?
The final item that I looked at was item 3-10.2.1, and this was described as a sample of stain A on the exterior left chest of the white t-shirt recovered from Christine Ricci.
And what was what profile did you locate?
For this sample, we generated a YSTR profile, and that profile was a mixture of at least 2 males.
And what is a YSTR DNA profile?
A Y profile is generated from testing that is specific only to male individuals. So in a DNA profile where there is a mixture of more than one person's DNA, if there's a large amount of female DNA and only a small amount of male DNA, using YSTR testing allows us to only look at DNA from the Y chromosome, which females do not have. So by using YSTR testing, we're able to pull out that male profile that otherwise would have been overwhelmed by the female DNA that's there.
In testing purposes, what's the difference?
All of the lab steps are mostly the same, except for the 3rd step when we're amplifying the samples. We will use slightly different chemicals that target only the Y chromosome and really negate all of the other DNA that's in there. At the end, all the other steps are the same, but the profile at the end is a little bit different.
And what's the importance of that?
The differences are important because they are considered to be patrilineal, meaning they are inherited through the Y chromosome down a family line. So an example would be a grandfather and a father and a son would all have the same YSTR profile as each other because it's inherited through the Y chromosome. And another example would be two brothers from the same father. They would also have the same Y profile as each other and as their father.
Now, you indicated that the YSTR DNA profile was a mixture of at least 2 male contributors. And then how do you separate the contributors? What types are there?
So for this case, or for this profile, I should say, there was what we call a major profile and a minor profile. When we recover the DNA profile, the contributors may contribute in different amounts. So a major profile is one that there's a lot of data there and it's very clear. And the minor profile is very low level trace amounts and really not enough to do any comparison or work with, but we can still use the major profile to compare to known standards.
And again, did you take the YSTR DNA profile from the questioned item and compare it to what?
I compared it to the Y profile standard for Michael Ricci.
And what was the results, ma'am?
That the major DNA profile is at least 174 times more likely if the profile originated from Michael Ricci or a patrilineal relative than if it originated from a randomly selected individual. 99.9% of the male population can be excluded from the major DNA profile.
What does that mean?
It means that when compared, the profile recovered from item 3-10.2.1, the major portion of the profile, when compared to the known Y standard from Michael Ricci, they were found to be consistent with one another. And then I performed some statistical calculations to add some weight to what that consistency means.
And how did you perform those statistical calculations?
For the YSTRs, we use a database online that gives us some population statistics that we can plug into basically an online calculator in order to calculate what the likelihood is of seeing this profile if it did originate from the same source or if it didn't.
And what was that source, if you recall?
So my calculation is comparing the likelihood of this profile, seeing this profile if it originated from Michael Ricci or seeing it if it originated from somebody else.
And what was your conclusion?
That the major DNA profile was at least 170 times more likely if the profile originated from Michael Ricci than if it originated from a randomly selected individual who was not a patrilineal relative.
And I'm not sure if you indicated this. What was the result of the minor profile?
The minor profile is not suitable for comparison. It was very low level and there was really nothing that could be done with it.
What, if anything else, did you do in regards to analysis on this item?
That's the completion of it.
Now, are you subject to technical and administrative review?
Yes, I am.
Was that completed in this case?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Did you do anything further?
No, I did not.
May I have a moment?
You may.
Thank you, ma'am. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any cross-examination?
No, Your Honor.
May step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Almost may call its next witness.
Taylor Fedichuk, please.
Stop right there. It's right here.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony given is to the court and the jury and that are now from the Commonwealth and Senate Bar the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? And you may have a seat.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury, spelling your last name for the record?
My name is Taylor Federchuk, last name spelled Federchuk.
Erchook.
And where are you employed, ma'am?
I'm employed at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory in the DNA unit.
In what capacity?
I am a forensic scientist and a DNA analyst.
And how long you been employed there for?
A little under 7 years.
Can you briefly describe your educational background, please?
I received a dual Bachelor of Science degree from West Virginia University in Forensic and Investigative Science and Biology. I then received my Master of Science degree from Boston University School of Medicine in Biomedical Forensic Science.
What is the nature of your work in your present position?
I am a DNA analyst in the DNA unit where we process samples and generate reports and provide courtroom testimony.
Now, do you have any specialized training?
Yes, I do.
What's that?
Upon my hire to the lab, I went through an approximately 9-month training process where I did mock laboratory work, lectures, required readings, etc., to then take a competency test to be deemed competent in DNA analysis.
And what were the results of your most recent competency proficiency examinations?
I was deemed competent in DNA analysis and continually proficient in DNA analysis.
And does your lab follow policies and protocols for DNA?
Yes, we do.
And that's where's that policy and procedure come from?
We have protocols for each step in our process that are determined by the laboratory.
Okay. Now, I want to direct your attention to this matter, lab number 21-02063. What was your role, Ms. Federtuk?
I was the technical reviewer of DNA testing report 4.
Okay. And what is a technical reviewer?
All of our files go through a review process. The technical review is an independent review of the data by another analyst that is trained to do the review process, where we check for accurate and completeness of the results.
And in this particular matter, what did you review?
I reviewed the worksheets, the data interpretation, and the report for DNA testing report 4.
Now, you had the opportunity to review item 1-4.2?
Yes, that is correct.
And what was that item?
That item was sample of stain A on the blade of knife on the dining room table at 679 Moraine Ave, or Moraine Street, I believe, sorry.
Now, what was, why was this tested at a different time than the other items upon your review?
It depends when things are submitted, or in this case, this was an exhaustive sample that was tested later after authorization of exhausting that sample.
And once an item is deemed exhaustive, how does the lab accommodate to that?
There are either the exhaustive testing can be put forward or somebody can observe the testing as well.
And was at some point the exhaustive testing was put forward?
Yes.
Okay. Now, upon your review, what was obtained, what DNA profile was obtained from that item 1-4?
A male DNA profile was obtained.
And how many contributors were assumed?
We assumed one contributor.
Okay. Now, upon your independent review, what were your findings, ma'am?
The DNA profile from this item is at least 9.1 nonillion times more likely if the DNA profile originated from Michael Ricci than if the profile originated from an unknown individual unrelated to Michael Ricci. This provides support for an inclusion, and Christine Ricci was excluded from this DNA profile.
And this was a STR profile?
Yes, that is correct.
And it's an inclusion of a fellow STR profile? Is that
yes,
accurate?
that is correct.
Okay. And you indicated Christine Ricci is excluded?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. Nothing further. Thank you, ma'am.
Any cross-exam?
Yeah, just a moment. You mentioned that this particular testing was exhaustive.
Yes, that is correct.
And that means that this was one of those samples where there was quantity limited, correct?
Yes, at the beginning of the process, yes. But however, we had enough DNA in our testing to go forward with the 4-step process.
You just didn't have enough DNA to save any portion of it for later testing, correct?
Of the original item swab itself, yes, that is correct.
Which indicates that there was a very small amount of DNA on this item.
Up front, before our quantification part of the testing, we don't know how much DNA, and certain samples are deemed quality possibly limited. In this case, there was a amount of DNA that was able to go forward, and there was still extract, or the volume that the DNA is eluted in is still available, yes.
This is through the amplification process.
Through the quantification process to know how much DNA we obtained from our sample.
Which is post-amplification?
No, that is pre the amplification process.
Okay. Nothing further.
Any redirect?
No, thank you.
The witness may step down. Commonwealth calls Officer Hunt, please.
Government desk, sir.
Good morning. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony and the evidence, report and the jury, and that are now and between the Commonwealth and the Senate of Washington, will truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Morning.
Good morning. You may proceed. Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
In a nice, loud, clear voice, could you introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for the record?
Yes, good morning. My name is Alexander Hunt. My last name is H-U-N-T.
Sir, where are you currently employed?
Marshfield Police Department.
In what capacity?
I'm a patrolman.
How long have you been employed by the Marshfield Police?
About 5 years.
Was that your first employment in law enforcement?
Yes.
And as a patrolman, what are some of your duties and responsibilities, sir?
I respond to emergency and non-emergency calls.
Drawing your attention, sir, to January 28th, 2021, were you working that day?
Yes, I was.
And as a patrolman?
Yes.
And what was your shift that you were working?
I was working at 4 p.m. to midnight shift.
And do you happen to remember the weather that day?
It was cold out. There was snow on the ground. I believe it was in the 30s.
And at approximately 4:48, sir, were you dispatched to a particular location?
Yes, I was dispatched to Marine Street.
And was that 679 Marine Street, if you recall?
Yes.
And what was the dispatch call for, sir?
It came in as
Objection, Your Honor, with regard to.
You can answer.
I came in as a medical 911 call saying that a male.
Objection, Your Honor.
It's a medical 911 call. Next question. And did you proceed to that location after getting the dispatch call, sir?
Yes, I did.
And approximately how long did it take you to respond to that location?
A few minutes.
And were you working alone or with a partner that day?
I was working with Officer Kelly.
Were you both in full uniform?
Yes.
In a marked cruiser?
Yes.
And who, if anyone else, arrived to 679 Marine Street roughly at the same time as you and Officer Kelly, sir?
Officer Chris Martin.
Were you three the first to arrive regarding first responders?
Yes.
And upon your arrival, can you describe your observations, sir?
When I arrived, the daughter was out front and she was pointing inside saying that her father had, he's the one having a medical emergency.
And specifically, where was she when you saw her, sir?
The daughter, she was outside in the driveway. She was pointing inside.
Was she alone?
Yes.
And how did she appear?
She was distraught. She was upset.
And upon entering the home, sir, what did you observe?
I saw Christine Ricci standing in the dining room, and then I saw Michael Ricci laying there on the floor.
And with regard to Michael Ricci, sir, could you describe how he was on the ground? In what position?
He was laying, his feet were towards Christine. He was laying face up. I think his leg might have been on like the staircase a little bit, but we kind of had to adjust him in order to provide CPR.
Fair to say he was on his back?
Yes.
Okay. And could you describe his physical appearance and condition?
He didn't have a pulse at the time. That's why we provided CPR.
What, if any, injuries did you observe on his person?
None at the time.
And what did you begin to treat him for?
I provided rescue breaths using an ambu bag, and Officer Kelly provided compressions.
And you indicated that the defendant, Christine Ricci, was standing near Michael Ricci, is that correct?
Yes.
Specifically where?
She was standing a couple feet away from him, almost like facing him.
And what was her condition?
She was upset, distraught. I couldn't really make out what she was saying. I know Officer Martin was speaking with her at the time while me and Officer Kelly were providing CPR.
And it's fair to say your role was not speaking to the defendant, correct?
Yes.
What was your focus?
It's providing CPR.
And when you first arrived with Officer Kelly and Martin and began performing emergency measures, had anyone in the home already been trying to or attempting to do the same?
No.
Excuse me, Your Honor. Objection. I move to strike that.
I'll see you at the side of the bar. I have a clarifying question.
Thank you. Officer Hunt,
When you arrived in the Ricci home, did you observe anyone performing any life-saving measures at that time?
No, I did not.
And during the course of your treatment of Michael Ricci, where was Christine Ricci?
She was almost standing over him, kind of like, as I said, a few feet away. She was kind of in front of the stairs.
And at some point while you were performing emergency measures, did anyone else arrive?
Eventually, the paramedics arrived on scene.
And what was their role in relationship to your role when they arrived?
I was kind of in a tight spot, so I remained giving rescue breaths while one of the paramedics took over compressions for Officer Kelly.
And was there any kind of machine that was brought in to assist with the emergency assistance?
Yes, they ended up strapping on a compression machine to allow for automatic compressions.
And in setting up that machine, what, if anything, did you observe the paramedics do with Michael Ricci's shirt?
They ended up ripping up his shirt to get a clear, to get the machine on clear.
And in the course of doing so, what, if anything, drew your attention on the gloves of one of the paramedics, sir?
While the paramedic was giving compressions, he kind of looked at his hand and saw some blood on it. I looked at it too, and I didn't really realize. I thought it was another injury from him falling or something like that, to that nature.
And why in particular did that draw your attention?
Because at the time, the paramedic kind of stopped and just looked at his hand for a second and then continued to do compressions and set up the machine. But we didn't know that there was another injury.
Objection, Your Honor.
All right. I'll strike that last portion. We didn't know there was another injury.
And at some point, was Michael Ricci moved to another location?
Yes, they strapped him on a backboard and brought him down to the ambulance.
Did you assist in any way with this transport of Michael Ricci to the ambulance?
No, I did not, but one of the paramedics left a bag, so I brought the bag out to the paramedics.
And upon bringing the bag back to the paramedics, did you have a conversation at some point with anyone at the ambulance?
Yes, it was Lieutenant Smith.
And what, if anything, did he tell you, sir?
He informed me that there was a stab wound.
And was that the first time you had heard about a stab wound?
Yes.
When did Lieutenant Smith inform you of this in relation to when Michael Ricci was placed inside the ambulance?
He was already placed inside the ambulance. He was coming back up to inform us. And while I kind of met him like halfway up the driveway.
And what, if anything, did you do with this information that Lieutenant Smith provided?
Myself and Lieutenant Smith both went back up to the house and informed Officer Kelly and Officer Martin.
And at that point, what happened next?
Officer Kelly asked Christine Ricci who stabbed him.
And what did she say?
She said, "That's what I've been saying, there's blood. He's bipolar and schizophrenic."
And had you heard her say that before?
No.
What was her demeanor like?
She was upset, kind of distraught. At the time, we were going to take her up to the hospital.
What was the purpose of bringing, or the intention of bringing Miss Ricci to the hospital?
Because we thought it was a medical emergency, which it was. So instead of having her drive up there, we were going to transport her to, not allow her to be distraught and get into an accident on the way up there.
And prior to getting into that, what, if anything else, did Christine Ricci say had happened as it relates to this stab wound that was discovered?
She took a knife to defend herself and saying that Michael Ricci had lunged at her or had fallen on her.
And again, had you heard her mention anything along those lines when you had first arrived?
No, I did not.
And what, if any, knife was discovered while you were there, sir?
There was a knife on the ground. It was behind her. Michael was laying to the left side of the staircase. Christine was in front of the staircase, and the knife was behind her a few feet to the right of the staircase.
Had you previously seen the knife, sir?
No.
And what, if any, observations did you make of the knife once it was located?
It was like a black kitchen steak knife. There was no blood on it that I could see.
What, if anything, did Christine Ricci say about the stab wound to his back?
She did not say anything about it.
What, if anything, did Ms. Ricci say about a cut in addition to this?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Your Honor, there's no evidence that she was asked about these things.
I will see you at the side of the bench, counsel.
Miles and miles on the clear blue skies. We drive straight as an arrow flies. Nowhere to be, no dreams to chase tonight. We got time to waste, let's waste it right.
Officer Hunt, at any time did you ask Christine Ricci about the stab wound to Michael Ricci's back?
I did not personally.
Were you present when anyone else did?
No.
And had, based on your training and experience, sir, had you been responding to a stabbing, how, if any, how would that response have differed than what you just described as your response being when you first got there?
I would have applied direct pressure to the wound and attempt to stop the bleeding.
And you indicated that initially, Ms. Ricci, the plan was to take her to the hospital. Is that right?
Yes.
And why was that originally the plan?
Initially, because we thought it, he was having some.
Objection, Your Honor.
Ask the question differently.
Sir, was the plan to take Ms. Ricci to the hospital when it was initially believed the situation was different with Michael Ricci?
Yes.
And then did the plan change as to where Ms. Ricci would go?
Yes.
Where did she go?
She came back to the Marshall Police Station.
And sir, at some point, was Sophia also taken somewhere?
Yes.
And where was that?
She was also taken to the station.
And once both Christine Ricci and Sophia Ricci were taken from the scene, what was your role as it relates to the scene?
I remained on scene to secure it, to make sure nobody entered or exited the scene.
May I have one moment, please?
You may.
Sir, one last question, just going back a few moments. When you testified about the paramedics, when they had hooked Michael Ricci up to the machine, the compression machine, that line of questioning, and you observed blood on the glove of one of the paramedics, may I just ask you a follow-up question about that?
Yes.
At any point, where, if anywhere, were you able to see where the blood was coming from?
We did not see. I didn't personally see where the blood was coming from. He had a couple lasers.
Objection.
You didn't see where it came from.
Thank you.
May I inquire, Your Honor?
You may.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
You mentioned that when you arrived at 679 Moraine Street on January 28, 2021, you noticed a body of a male lying on the floor, correct?
Yes.
In a supine position.
Yes.
Meaning his face was facing towards the ceiling, correct? And he was on his back.
Yes.
And his feet, you said, were on the staircase or near the stairs.
One of his legs might have been.
Right. And just so we're clear, these were a couple of stairs that were between the sunken living room, dining room area and the kitchen area, correct?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that you saw blood on the hands of one of the paramedics while he was giving chest compressions, correct?
Yes.
So this would have been while his hands were on the front of Mr. Ricci's body doing chest compressions on his chest area?
Well, as you're doing CPR, you're supposed to give about 30 chest compressions, allow the person to give rescue breaths so that whoever's doing the chest compressions has to stop. So while he was stopping and I was giving the rescue breaths, he was looking at his hands.
So in other words, just want to make this clear, the compressions are on the front of his body.
Yes.
And that's when you noticed blood on his gloves for the first time.
Yes.
You said that when you first got to the scene, your primary focus, along with Officer Kelly, was to take care of the man on the floor.
Yes.
And you weren't paying particular attention to Christine Ricci except where she was standing.
Yes.
And it was really Christopher Martin, Officer Martin, who was talking to her.
Yes.
And you mentioned that she was very upset. Yes. And when you say upset, you mean she was crying, correct?
Yes.
She was hyperventilating?
Yes.
She was heaving?
Yes.
It was very difficult to understand what she was saying.
Yes.
And so you were focused on dealing with the medical issues and you weren't really paying attention to what she was saying.
Yes.
And you were leaving that task to Martin.
Yes.
And of course, she was saying a lot of things, but it was very highly emotional and it was difficult to understand.
Yes.
Now, when you arrived on the scene, you don't know whether Christine Ricci or Sophia Ricci at that point had done anything, any life-saving measures before you got there, correct?
Not that I know of.
Right. All you know is when you walked in, everyone back was away from the body by, as you say, a feet or a couple feet.
Yes.
Giving you the appropriate space that you needed to work, correct?
Yes.
You said that when how did you put it? When Lieutenant Smith comes in and mentions the puncture wound, you're there when Officer Kelly asks again about, or asks Christine Ricci a question?
When I went out to give a medical bag to the paramedics that they left inside, Lieutenant Smith met me halfway and informed me of the wound, and he came in along to speak with Officer Kelly.
And Officer Kelly directed a question to Ms. Ricci at that point, right?
Yes.
And she began her statement with, "That's what I've been telling you."
Yes.
Right? Does the grammar of that clause suggest that she had said something about it before?
Objection. You can answer it.
Yes, it could be.
Right. And again, it was Christopher Martin who was spending the time talking to her before when she was so upset while you guys were working the body, right? At some point also, she says, in describing how it all went down, she mentions that he fell on her. Is that your memory?
Something to that nature, yes.
Okay. Nothing further.
Redirect, very briefly. Sir, defense counsel just said defendant Christine Ricci, when you first arrived, she was upset, hyperventilating, heaving, correct?
Yes.
And she was, as you said, a bit difficult to understand. Is that right?
Yes.
And then he said she was saying a lot. Was she in fact saying a lot?
No, not that I heard.
What was she doing?
She was kind of just crying, mostly from what I could hear.
Do you hear any actual words you could decipher besides the tears and the hyperventilating?
No.
Did you ever hear the word knife until Lieutenant Smith asked about the stabbing?
Objection, Your Honor. He said he wasn't listening to what she said.
Overruled.
No, I did not.
Thank you. Recross.
Yes. Sir, it was Christopher Martin that was paying attention to what Ms. Ricci was saying, correct?
He was speaking with her, yes.
Right. You were paying attention to taking care of the man on the floor.
Yes, my main focus was providing CPR.
Correct. And you don't really know what Ms. Ricci said to Officer Martin, do you?
I did not hear anything.
Right. Thank you. Nothing further.
The witness may step down.
Yeah.
So jurors, now might be a time to take our morning break. It's a little bit past the 11 o'clock hour, but you didn't come out quite on time this morning. So I'll give you your morning break.
Rise for the jurors. Let's place the notebooks in the chair and exit this way.
Let's talk about Mr. Dillon. What's the Commonwealth's proffer of what, well, you've had some conversations, as I understand it, over the weekend. And as I understand it, you didn't reach much common ground with regard to that. So,
Maybe I can frame what the issue is, just if they are not aware of what my problem with Mr. Dillon's testimony is.
Sorry, just to interrupt. We did communicate not about Mr. Dillon. I was not presented with any information as to his questions.
all right, I appreciate that clarification. So do you think if you talk now about Mr. Dillon, that we're going to remove some of the issues from the plate?
Well, let me explain what my issue is.
Who is Mr. Dillon?
Mr. Dillon is Michael Ricci's boss for the last 5 years prior to his death. He is the district fire chief at the time in Boston. And
Is he the individual that he was driving around?
Yes. And so the portions of the testimony that I find objectionable are throughout every time that he's testified. For example, at grand jury, as I'm sure Your Honor remembers, he offered testimony about, you know, the fact that they only accept stable people in that role, that he never saw, you know, that he didn't think that Michael had any mental illness, that they have to have very good reputation, that they directly work with you, have to maintain physical and mental stability and all of this stuff, which Michael Dillon is not in a position to testify to. He can testify to his observations, I agree, but not this trying to sort of do character evidence, character bolstering as a way of saying, oh, well, he, you know, must not have had any mental illness because Michael Dillon, who he drove around, says that he wouldn't have picked someone like that who in such a position. So I think that's objectionable, that portion of his proffered testimony. And then we're also renewing our objection, of course, with regard to the prior bad acts. Particularly, and there's also a statement about Michael's estrangement from his family, and that I think is also objectionable. It's clearly learned through hearsay information and shouldn't come in. They're just putting in 2 black items. Is that
Yes.
Your Honor, with regard to the very last thing defense counsel said, we do not intend to ask Michael Dillon anything about what he was told from Michael Ricci about his family or anything like that. So that's not an
Consistent with
issue.
my order, right?
Right, exactly. Per your order, what I have gauged from it is that Michael Dillon can testify to his observations of alleged victim's physical condition and cannot testify about the alleged victim's comments about the defendant's temper. So we understand loud and clear your rulings. As it relates to what defense counsel is now bringing up, had defense counsel not made the alleged victim's kind of mental health, intoxication, all of that kind of an issue, if you will, and raised it for the jury to consider, I would argue then perhaps this testimony would not be attempted to be elicited. But this is an individual, Michael Dillon, who spent more time with the alleged victim up until his death than virtually anyone else. He chose him, handpicked him to drive him because of how responsible he was, how, and then during grand jury, he was asked, you know, did you have any concerns about his mental health? Any concerns about his his drinking habits, anything like that? Would you have had somebody be your aide driving around the fire chief? if those were issues. And he indicated absolutely not. He did not. So we don't intend to spend a long time on that. What we anticipate is he would testify to their relationship and the observations per your order, Your Honor. For example, we would ask how important is an aide's physical and mental stability, and whether or not he was handpicked. And then
And he was handpicked by Mr. Dillon himself to have this job?
Yes.
Okay.
And then he worked with him right up until the Friday before his death, the same day that Michael Ricci Jr. is expected to testify. He went in to speak to his father. He would also testify, Your Honor, that he developed a friendship with him because of his working relationship. And he would talk about basically the injuries he observed at different junctures, Your Honor. One of which, well, I don't need to repeat this. This was all in your
In the
order,
prior
Your
bad acts.
And the last injury he observed was 1 week prior to his death. And those were scratches on his neck. That's essentially, it's very quick. I would intend to ask him if he was ever had any concerns about Mr. Michael Ricci's drinking or any concerns about his behavior, including, did he ever come to work smelling like booze?
So observations is different than any concerns. The question needs to be phrased by his observations. Did you ever observe him? Did you ever smell anything? Did you ever, those kinds of observations, what he saw, what he heard. Well, not what he heard with the limitations of I've previously given you, but those observations are fair game. Equally, it seems to me, he made the decision to hire this man for this job. The criteria that he used in deciding that he was an acceptable and the person he wanted to pick for this job is relevant to the jury's decision-making in light of the issues that have been raised with regard to the alleged victims' intoxication or capabilities. And those observations are just that. The jury's going to have to draw whatever inferences they think are reasonable from those observations, but the observations themselves are fair game.
What about the statement, we picked him for his mental stability? That's a conclusion.
No. He can go through the criteria that he used to select the candidate and to select Mr. Ricci and his observations of Mr. Ricci as he worked with him day to day. And then the prior restrictions that I put on the prior bad act still stand, of course.
Thank you.
All right. So next in order is McDonald, Benson,
Michael Dillon.
then Dillon. Okay. Do we think we're going to get to McDonald before the break?
Which McDonald?
Before the lunch break, are you referring to Mark McDonald or Trooper McDonald?
I meant Mark McDonald.
No.
I don't think so. I think that's going to be post-lunch hour, Your Honor.
All right. So address with me whatever additional items you want to that aren't covered by my order before we get to that individual. All right. Have a good break.
All rise.
What's that? You feel like $1 million?
I get so nervous that I forget.
Just listening because they often have hot mic moments here. I think it's safe to say the audio's been cut off. Yeah, that's definitely cut off. Bit of a boring start. One of the people that we're waiting for is the son's ex-girlfriend. That's one of the ones that's still left. That should be a good one. But I think that the state, in my opinion, did it the wrong way around. They started with very emotional testimony, and then they went to this absolutely boring same thing after the other, like 3 witnesses who just confirm each other's. I think they should have done this, laid the foundation, this is the facts of the case, and then go back to the emotional testimony, give it to defense, and then any rebuttal after that. So that when they're going into the defense, they're going in through the lens of like the victim's family. I think that would have been the better way to do it. Lil Miss, Vicky, were you trying to find all of the videos on that Simpson sentencing case? That was very touching. Yes. I was. And I realized when I was editing parts of it that we can't, because he says, I haven't had you before me before this. He says something along those lines. So I don't know if it's actually in a different judge's court, but he's never been in Simpson before. I also remembered who I was talking about when I said Casanova and Judge Boyd. It's that sovereign citizen man, flesh and blood. He has long black hair. That's who I think I was talking about. So we can hop over to Judge Boyd. Well, I don't know. I can also play that Judge Simpson one just straight up, but it is emotional. So if you don't want to cry at this point in the day, what I was going to do is I was going to upload it as a normal video so that people can watch it when they have like the mental capacity to.
Or CRZ to help you guide?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you can lower your hand, state your name for the record.
Right, Ryan Aguilar.
All right, Mr. Aguilar, in this court, the state usually will tender an offer to the accused. And then the court will allow you a chance to consider the offer or consider any type of plea negotiations by way of a plea deadline date. Your attorney is telling me that you do not want a plea deadline date, you just wish to have a jury trial. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Ms. Ferguson. And we're off the record. How long do y'all expect this trial to last?
2 days, Your
All right, this is a 2-day trial. And the court will not accept any plea bargain agreements without good cause. Otherwise, you have to plea open to the court. Do you understand?
Ooh, trial.
And can you check the system and make sure the acknowledgement of discovery is in the system?
Yeah. Yeah.
September 3rd. Once you sign the reset form, you are excused, and thank you for dressing appropriately for court. All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Please use.
Once he signs the reset form. All right, who is here on Clarence McDaniel?
What I was trying to do is find news-related articles and that sort of thing. At this very moment, I've blanked on his name, and I've been looking so much up.
You've gotten 2 of those. We gave you those 2 of them early. The top one, I think it's the new one. Good morning, Judge.
Good morning.
Judge, before we get started, on this case, it is a cap of silent plea, and no PSI was done, and defense would argue that we are entitled to it under 40.
Well, here's the thing. Let me stop everybody right there, because I asked you all if you wanted a PSI or if you wanted the court to consider it without the PSI. The reason why he doesn't have a PSI is because parties said they didn't want that. That's why you all had it. But if you want a PSI, you can get your PSI. But do not come before the court saying you don't want a PSI, and then now everybody wants a PSI. Ms. Ferguson, can you set this for a PSI?
If I said we didn't want a PSI, I misspoke because I do not remember saying that. I would have never said that in this case. So I
No, that's
don't
what-
believe I said that, but
No, that's what was said because I will tell you, in this court, I asked people, do you want a PSI? I will tell people, the only thing I need sometimes based upon the nature of the charge is the criminal history. And everybody said, yeah, we can go along with that. And I reset it from June 27th to now, so that if the defense wanted to bring in witnesses, they could bring in witnesses. But both parties agreed they didn't need a PSI. What date, Ms. Ferguson? All right, you'll be back on September 12th. Vashawn, if you can do a PSI, please. With the tap eval.
thank you, Judge.
You're welcome. Norma, what pages is he on? I know he's on 9. He has a second page though, doesn't he? Because he has 2 cases. All right, thank you.
Good morning.
He's changed his mind. He does not want a PSI.
No, we're doing the PSI.
Okay.
Okay.
And Judge, I really don't believe you asked me. I don't.
No, I
don't-
tell you, I always
Never
do.
said that.
I will tell you, the state and other defense counsel will tell you that I always say, do you want a PSI? It depends on the nature of the case. And when people say they don't want a PSI, I will tell the state, all I need is criminal history. So I want to give him his PSI since he wanted one now, so.
And he didn't understand he was gonna have to wait another month and a half, Judge, and so he wants to go forward now without it. There's no
All right,
way.
Mr.
without him.
McDaniel, your attorney has requested a PSI, so you're gonna have the PSI and the TAP evaluation done. The soonest it can be done is September 12th, because that's the schedule that probation is on. All right, so we'll see you back on September 12th. All right, Darren Johnson. Hello, counsel, you're on this side. And did you introduce yourself to the court reporter?
My name is William Davidson.
Hello.
Hi, Your Honor.
All right, and you always dress appropriately for court. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, so where are we on this case, counsel?
Your Honor, the offer has been tendered today,
Okay,
and my client, I think originally it was set for the last date that an offer could be considered,
okay.
but she was only given the offer today, and I haven't showed her all the.
No, she wasn't, her plea deadline date wasn't set for today.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I didn't know.
Okay, all right, so what we'll do is, Ms. Ferguson, if you can do a recall on this case for plea deadline date, and if you give us 30 days, is that enough time for you?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank
All
you.
right, I figured that'll give you time to look over whatever evidence and, all right?
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, we're going to be back on August 26th. On August 26th, you'll need to let the court know whether you're not, if you're accepting the plea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, once you sign the reset form, you're excused.
Thank you. Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Thank you. And Your Honor, may I be excused?
Yes, thank you. All right, who's here on Juan Caballeros?
Back to the bus, Judge, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, and counsel, did you introduce yourself to the court reporter?
Nick Aguilera, AG.
All right, court is calling 2024 CR 5374, State of Texas versus Juan Eduardo Caballeros. Could I have parties announced for the record for the state?
Andrew Harris, Edelman.
Defense?
Nick Aguilera on behalf of the Honorable Caleros.
Oh, is it Calera?
Caballeros.
See, I'm just adding extra syllables to your name. How do you pronounce it?
Caballeros, so C-A-L-L, like
Caballeros?
Caballeros.
All right. Counsel, have you received all of the discovery?
At your point, yes, Judge.
And did you review it with your client?
Yes, Judge.
Court will find that the state is in compliance with discovery. Mr. Caballeros, did you review the application for deferred adjudication with
Yes,
your
ma'am.
attorney?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand it?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you sign it?
Yes.
Did you review the true bill of indictment with your attorney?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand it?
Yes.
Counsel, do you waive the reading of the indictment?
Yes, Your Honor.
State, are you proceeding on the indictment as presented?
Believe so, Your Honor.
Going forward on count one, Judge.
All right. Mr. Caballeros, did you review the document entitled Court Admonishments and Defendants Waivers and Affidavit of Admonitions with your attorney?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand it?
Yes.
Did you sign it in all the appropriate places?
Yes.
Did you understand in the indictment? Oh, I'm sorry, you all are proceeding on count one?
Waiving count two, Your Honor.
Any objections to the waiver of count two?
No, Your
All right, in count one, you're charged with the offense of possession with intent to deliver a controlled substance, penalty group 2, 1 grams to 4 grams. That's a second-degree felony. Range of punishment is anywhere from 2 to 20 years in prison and up to a $10,000 fine. Did you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
If you have a plea with the state, court does not have to follow your plea. If for any reason the court does not follow your plea and gives you more than you bargained for, the fact that you entered a plea will not be used against you, and you will be allowed to withdraw your plea. Did you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand you have a right to jury trial? A right for you or your attorney to cross-examine and confront any witnesses the state would call and the right to remain silent?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand by entering this plea, you were giving up those rights?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you intend to give up those rights and enter into a plea in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand if the court were to grant your application for deferred adjudication, if for any reason your deferred adjudication were revoked, the court could find you guilty and sentence you up to 20 years in prison and up to $10,000 fine?
Yes, ma'am.
You have to make sure you keep your voice up, okay?
Okay. Okay.
So the court reporter can hear.
Okay.
Counsel, has your client been able to provide you with any defenses?
Yes, Your Honor.
He has a rational as well as a factual understanding of the charges against him.
Yes, Judge.
Do you believe he's currently competent and was legally sane at the time of the offense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Caballeros, has anyone threatened you, coerced you, or placed you in fear to get you to enter the plea?
No, ma'am.
Anyone promised you anything other than the plea?
No.
Are you satisfied with the way you've been represented?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you a U.S. citizen?
Yes.
All right, did you review the plea bargain page with your attorney?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand it?
Yes, ma'am.
According to the plea, the state is proceeding on count one. There's a $2,000 fine. State is recommending deferred adjudication. This is the run concurrent with County Court 9 cause number 699437. They're taking in consideration 658-757, JN 215-9813, and there's to be restitution for drug testing. Did you understand that to be the plea?
Yes, ma'am.
Defense, is that the plea?
Yes, Your Honor.
State, is that the plea?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you review the waiver of appeal paragraph with your attorney? Did you understand it?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand by signing it, you waiving your right to appeal? The only items that can be appealed are written pretrial motions that have been filed, heard, and ruled upon by the court. Did you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Counsel, have there been any such motions?
No, Your Honor.
And did you sign beneath that paragraph twice?
Yes.
Outside the agreement, the state is requesting that your community supervision be for a term of 5 years. There'll be a TAP evaluation and 150 hours of community service restitution. Did you understand that was a recommendation from the state and the court does not have to follow that recommendation?
Yes, ma'am.
Then to the offense as charged in count one, how do you plead? Guilty, not guilty, or no contest?
Guilty.
All right, state, any evidence
be contained in exhibit 1 and attachments, Your Honor.
Judge, we've had the opportunity to review those exhibits and have no objection.
All right, state you may be excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Did you review the document entitled Waiver and Consent to Stipulation of Testimony and Stipulations with your attorney? Did you understand it?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you sign it in all the appropriate places?
Yes, ma'am.
Again, did you understand you have a right to jury trial, a right for you or your attorney to cross-examine and confront any witnesses the state would call, and the right to remain silent?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand that today the state will be presenting evidence in the form of witnesses' statements and police reports and laboratory reports? But most importantly, there'll be no live testimony. Did you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Court will find that defendant has knowingly and voluntarily waived and consented to stipulation of testimony and stipulations. Court will accept into evidence states exhibits 1 and attachments, and the court will review the same. All right. After reviewing states exhibits 1 and attachments, the court will find there is sufficient evidence to find you guilty. The court would defer finding of guilt as you applied for deferred adjudication. Are you proceeding with sentencing?
Judge, if you would consider proceeding with sentencing, we do know there's a TAP evaluation and he has no problem following any recommendations that they may come up with.
All right. Anything you wish to say on behalf of your client?
Judge, you read the report, he accepted responsibility at the traffic stop, he made an admission. Today is our first appearance in court. Prosecutors made a very fair offer of deferred, and he did not waste any time saying that he would like to take it, no dragging our feet out. He would like you to consider following up with him.
All right. How far did you go in school?
I graduated.
All right. So what are you doing with your life other than speeding?
I prep
Mhm.
Italian restaurant on Alamo Heights, by the way.
Oh, what's the name of the restaurant?
Sorrento's.
Sorrento's. I don't think I've ever been there.
I get it. Yeah.
But is it very expensive?
It's like Olive Garden kind of prices.
Oh, you know what? I think I've been there before.
It's better than Olive Garden.
Yeah, it's better than Olive Garden. We have
All right,
features and
hey, we're not going to disparage anybody in here. Because, free bread, sticks and salad, that's something that you have to throw in the mix.
Although that prices have gone up.
Yeah. It's like the cheddar biscuits at Red Lobster. I mean, you can say what you will, but their cheddar biscuits are great. Do you have any children?
One on the way,
He does
actually.
have one on the way, Judge.
Okay. So what are your plans for employment? Are you going to always work there? What are you planning on doing?
Well, I've been thinking about going out of town for construction, just to, stay clean, get away from all this.
Okay.
The opportunity that he has may require him to travel out of state
Okay.
as far as Florida.
All right. And if you're drug tested today?
Would I come out clean? Yeah,
Are you clean or dirty?
right now I'm dirty,
All right, so what are you dirty for?
just weed.
All right, how long you been smoking weed?
Since high school, but I mean, I'm not, like, since I got older, I haven't really been smoking a lot, just like here and then.
All right, what does that mean?
How often? When was the last time you smoked?
Last week.
All right, so here's the thing. You can't smoke marijuana on probation.
Yeah.
Those are the rules. You can't drink alcohol on probation, even if you're in your home. Those are the rules.
So nothing, okay.
No, you're not allowed to. And people, oh, Judge Boyd, why are you being so hard? That's the law,
Yeah.
right? So you're not allowed to do marijuana. If there's some issue where there's a mental health issue, and that's the reason maybe you're using it, then you need to let probation know, and we'll have you see a doctor. You understand? So where are your parents?
I don't have a dad. He passed away when I was young, and my mom lives in Mexico.
Okay, so who's your support system here?
My tia.
Yeah, uncle or aunt, I don't know.
Tina is an aunt.
Huh?
Come on,
because
I know that little Spanish.
But there was a lawyer in the office group that kept calling Johnny Cisnero Tia. I thought that meant uncle.
Maybe he was saying Tio. I don't know if there's a difference, but what is an uncle in Spanish?
Tio.
Yeah, that's what he was probably saying.
Well, I thought that's what he was saying.
All right. This is what, do you want to speak with regards to the length of probation time?
Judge, one did ask about the length, and we discussed the possibility of an early term if he complied early on and got everything done, the community service, patches, UAs. We did consider, we were hoping he would consider an early termination, maybe about the 2-year part. 2-year
Okay.
mark.
All right, so it's going to be 5 years deferred adjudication. There'll be a $2,000 fine that will be probated. There's going to be proof of employment. Within 30 days. There's to be no employment as a home health care provider or with minors. There's to be regular reporting by Zoom or in person. There's to be regular random UAs. Ms. Abrams, if you'll make sure that they test for levels, your levels with the marijuana needs to start going down. You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
And I do require that probation do field visits. Possession of marijuana is not legal in Texas. You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
There's going to be field visits. One time per month for 6 months. Then at probation's discretion. And who do you live with?
Well, since I had a baby on the way with my baby mama, she heard the
Let's just say the mother of your future child.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I got an apartment. It's under her name, but I pay for it.
Okay. All right. Don't be bringing any drama to her doorstep, because let me just tell you, she has decided to make you her star, and she wants you in her life. She's decided to have a child with you, and you've brought this baggage with her already, which is this case. So you're going to have to change your ways. Don't bring drama to her doorstep. Don't have drugs at her house. Don't do any of that, because she's trusting you. And now that you have a baby on the way, everything that you do from here on out, you need to do it so your child will be glad to tell children at school, well, this is my dad. You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Do not be a disappointment. Okay? All right. So then we're going to do take in consideration 658, 757, JN 215, 9813. This will run concurrent with 699, 437. There's going to be 150 hours community service restitution. I'm going to order that you do parenting classes Once you've completed parenting classes, the community service hours will be deemed satisfied. And we can do a TAP evaluation out of custody. Probation, if TAP recommends inpatient treatment, we'll start him with intensive outpatient treatment. There's to be restitution to SAPD for drug testing. Counsel, if you think that amount is too high, you can come back to the court and we can have a restitution hearing for that.
Certainly.
Probation, is there anything else he needs? Is there anything else you need from the court to be successful?
No, ma'am.
All right, did you review the document entitled Trial Court Certification of Defendant's Rights to Appeal with your attorney?
Yes.
Did you understand it?
Yes, ma'am.
Because this is a plea bargain agreement, because I followed your plea bargain agreement, and because you waived your right to appeal, you do not have the court's permission to appeal. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we can go off the record. Here's the thing, to be successful in this court, communication is key.
Okay.
I know maybe other courts do things differently, but in here, if you feel like you're going to use marijuana, pick up the phone, call your probation officer, tell them, hey, I really feel like I'm going to use. And you know what they're going to do? They're probably going to tell you, this is where you need to go. Go to an AA meeting, go to an NA meeting. If you feel as though they're not addressing your issues, you can always come back to court. And from here on out, everything you do, you need to ask yourself 2 questions. Could this potentially result in me being revoked? And you're looking up 20 years in prison. If the answer is yes, don't do it. If the answer is maybe, don't do it. Because guess what? When you bring the newborn baby home, that time passes by so quickly. And if you end up going to prison on this, by the time you come out, if that's what ends up happening, that child is not going to know you. And there may be some other man, because people know no loyalty to wait for you. It's not like a Lifetime movie where they're waiting for you to get out of prison. You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
And I see that one of the cases that this is running concurrently with is a gun case. Again, you're going to have a little baby running around. You're not allowed to have weapons because you're on probation. You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
And if you ever get to that point where you're allowed to have weapons, you need to make sure those weapons are secure because children are curious and they will find things. You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Good luck to you. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for dressing appropriately.
Thank you.
Judge, may we be excused to go to County Court 9 and then come back up here to see probation?
Just let probation, talk to probation.
Okay, we need to jump back to the other court because we're running a bit late now.
Your Honor, returning to the matter, Commonwealth is Christine Ricci. All parties are present in the courtroom.
Counsel, juror number 6 has indicated to the court officer that he recognized one of the witnesses this morning, and I think the witness that he recognized is Hartnett. So I'm going to call him in to the side of the bench and inquire about it. The camera should be off.
Okay. Kind of glad we were behind.
Good, all right, jury entering. Court's now in session. Be seated, please.
Commonwealth may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Commonwealth would call Jerome McDonald.
Morning. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony and the evidence that you give to the court and the jury in the matter now and to the Commonwealth and defendant at large and the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help God? Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you please tell the jurors your first and last name and spell your last name for the record?
Yeah, it's Jerome McDonald, MacDonald.
And how are you employed?
I'm a trooper with the Massachusetts State Police
How long have you been with the state police?
since March of 2012.
And what's your current assignment with the state police?
I'm assigned to the State Police Detective Unit in the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office
And how long have you been with that unit?
since June of 2018.
Can you tell the jurors briefly what your role is as a trooper with the Massachusetts State Police Detective Unit?
I'm currently assigned to the narcotics unit inside the State Police Detective Unit office. And previously to that, I was assigned to the homicide unit.
As it pertains to your work in the homicide unit, what does the State Police Detective Unit do in the homicide unit?
You're working on-call capacity. You get called out to death investigations. Could be anything from a heart attack, an overdose, a suicide, and then motor vehicle crashes and homicide investigations.
And when the State Police Detective Unit is involved in an investigation into a death, do you often work with the local law enforcement in investigating those deaths?
Yes.
And is there generally a particular trooper who's designated as a case officer for each investigation?
Yes.
And what does the case officer generally do?
The case officer is designated to receive the information from the other detectives or troopers or local officers out in the field collecting evidence.
And when you're not assigned as a case officer in an investigation into a death, fair to say a lot of the other troopers and the local detectives all divide up the work and talk to different people and do different parts of the investigation.
Yes.
So it's very much a team effort.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to draw your attention to January 28th of the year 2021. Were you working with the Massachusetts State Police Detective Unit at the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office at that time?
Yes.
And were you part of the homicide unit at that time?
Correct.
And do you recall at some point in the evening responding to the South Shore Hospital?
Yes, I do.
Did a particular individual request that you go to that location?
Yeah, I was notified about 1727 hours by Sergeant Robert Klimas.
And for those of us who might not know what 1727 in non-military time.
5:27 p.m. Sorry.
And Sergeant Klimas, was that an individual who was kind of helping to oversee the investigation at that time?
Yes.
When you arrived at the South Shore Hospital, were there any other troopers or law enforcement present?
The trooper Bill Watson from the State Police Crime Scene Services was there.
And you're familiar in your work with the detectives unit about what the Crime Scene Services section does, correct?
Yes.
And oftentimes, do you work in connection with those troopers with the Crime Scene Services section when you respond to a death?
Yes.
And in this particular circumstance, what was Trooper Watson there to do?
Objection, Your Honor,
Bases?
of my objection.
Yes.
We still don't have a foundation as to how he would know why Trooper Watson was sent there or how he learned that, which could
Lay the
possibly be
foundation.
secondhand information.
Lay the foundation.
Trooper McDonald, when a death occurs in any town in Plymouth County, is it fair to say that a member of the crime scene services section comes out to the scene?
Yes.
And what do crime scene services section, what do they do?
They process the scene for fingerprints, photographs.
And in a situation where a trooper comes out to photograph a scene, is it fair to say that sometimes there are multiple places that troopers are designated or dispatched to go to photograph scenes in this type of investigation?
Yes.
And so when you were called to respond to the South Shore Hospital, were you aware that a member of the crime scene services was also dispatched to the hospital?
Objection.
If he was aware.
Aware of if they were dispatched prior to my receiving the call, or
Well, at any point on your way to the South Shore Hospital, were you aware that somebody from crime scene services was going to meet you there?
usually that's part of, I don't take the picture, so usually they do meet me there, yes.
Okay. And in this particular circumstances, when you arrived at South Shore Hospital, did you see Trooper Watson?
Yes.
And have you worked with Trooper Watson before?
Yes.
Have you had the experience to observe him document individuals or scenes with photographs before?
Yes, I have.
And so when you were at the South Shore Hospital, where were you directed to go when you arrived at the hospital?
When I got to the hospital, I met with medical staff, and then they directed me to the room that Mr. Ricci was.
And did Trooper Watson accompany you to that room?
Yes.
And did you make observations of Mr. Ricci?
Yes, I did.
Was he alive or was he already deceased?
He was deceased at that time.
And was Trooper Watson with you in the room?
Yes, he was.
What did you observe Trooper Watson do when you were both in the room with Mr. Ricci's body?
He was taking digital pictures of Mr. Ricci, and he attempted to put brown bags on Mr. Ricci's hands.
Were you able to make observations of Mr. Ricci's body?
Yes.
And did anything stand out to you on his body?
Yes.
What did you observe?
I observed a wound to his left upper breast, a wound to the back of his shoulder blade here. I observed a wound to this, another wound to this part of the back.
And just for purpose of the record, you're gesturing to the jury to the middle area of your back, correct?
Yes.
Is that where you saw an injury or some sort of mark on Mr. Ricci?
Yeah, these three areas were injuries that were consistent with a sharp object.
Objection.
Overruled. Just your observations of what you saw.
As far as the wound to the front of Mr. Ricci's body and his chest area that you described, what were your observations of that particular wound?
This one, there was a hole, and there was blood kind of around that hole, like dried blood.
And as far as the wound that you indicated was on his rear left shoulder, what were your observations of that wound?
This one here was like a dark red wound in his, right in this part of the shoulder blade.
Okay. And the wound that you described on his back, did that look different than the two wounds that you just previously described?
Yeah, the one on the back was just a little lighter. Didn't seem like it was as deep as the other two.
And was that wound on the back significantly longer than the other two wounds you observed?
I can't say at this time.
Now, you mentioned that Trooper Watson was photographing the body and that he bagged his hands. Are you familiar with what he was doing when Trooper Watson bagged the hands?
Yes, specifically on the right hand, there was a couple marks, like small sharp marks, and Trooper Watson was bagging the hands to preserve any type of possible biological or DNA evidence on his hands.
And before the bags were placed over Mr. Ricci's hands, did you observe those marks that you described yourself?
I observed them, yes.
Now, again, at that point, you had learned that Mr. Ricci had already expired.
That's correct.
Did you take custody of any particular items from the hospital that were that had belonged to Mr. Ricci?
Yes, it was the items that was on Mr. Ricci's person at the time.
Okay. And was there clothing that was provided to you by hospital staff?
Yes, there was.
And was there a personal item, like a wallet, that was provided to you by hospital staff?
Yes, it was footwear, pants, a wallet, belt, I believe a phone, and 2 shirts.
And why did you take custody of those particular items?
To take custody and transport them to the chemist.
And as far as the items that you described as there were 2 shirts, do you recall seeing those 2 shirts before collecting those items from the hospital staff?
They're usually, when I get there, they're usually bagged up at that point, but I know they were dark colored shirts.
Okay, and when you take custody of a particular item, you're responsible for them until they get to the next person in the chain of custody. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
And so you would have looked at those shirts prior to collecting them to take custody of them?
Correct. I would have kept them in the bag, though.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, if I may retrieve some items to show the witness.
You may.
If I may approach the witness.
You may.
I'm just showing you an item. Can you see the item from where you're sitting?
Yes.
Are you familiar with this particular item?
Yes.
And what do you know this item to be?
That's the short sleeve shirt that Mr. Ricci was wearing.
Okay, and again, you retrieved this particular item from the hospital staff after it had been removed from Mr. Ricci by hospital staff on January 28th, 2021?
Correct.
At this time, Your Honor, I would move to admit this as the next exhibit.
Is there an objection?
No, Your Honor.
Are we at Exhibit 30?
And Trooper, you indicated there was a second shirt that was in Mr. Ricci's property, correct?
Yes.
If I may approach.
You may.
Showing you another item. Is that familiar to you?
Yes.
And what do you know this item to be?
That'd be the long sleeve shirt.
And fair to say this is the second shirt you described that you received from hospital staff with Mr. Ricci's belongings on January 28th, 2021?
Correct.
I would move to admit this as the next exhibit.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Be marked and admitted as Exhibit 31.
Now, once you collected the items from the hospital, including what's now been marked as exhibit number 30 and 31, as well as the other items you described, you indicated that you took those back and provided them to a member of the crime scene team.
Yes.
Do you recall who you gave them to?
I apologize. I can't remember at this very moment.
Okay, but is it fair to say that there are usually forensic scientists as well that come out to the scene that collect the items and bring them back to the lab?
Yes.
And in this case, you're aware that there was a member of the crime scene response team that was a forensic scientist who was collecting items, including clothing and swabs from the scenes.
Correct.
Now, while you were at the hospital, did you see and speak to Angel Ricci and Michael Ricci Jr.?
Yes.
And in your conversations with Angel and Michael, did you determine whether they had been at the home where the original incident occurred that night?
I do not believe they were home at the time of the incident, no.
And as far as what you observed of Mr. Ricci's body at the hospital and the items you collected, as well as your conversations with Angel and Michael Jr. at the hospital, did you report all that information back to the supervising sergeant and case officer on this case?
Yes,
And fair to say that's all that you yourself did on the evening of January 28th, 2021, in regards to this investigation?
that's correct.
Thank you.
Cross-exam.
One moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
The mark on Mr. Ritchie's lower back that you mentioned, that was just sort of a scratch mark, right? It wasn't deep. in other words.
It wasn't deeper. It wasn't as deep as the other two, correct?
And it wasn't, it was already scabbed over when you saw it, correct?
I don't recall the scab being there.
You recall it being an opened bleeding wound when you saw it?
I didn't see any blood in that area.
Uh-huh.
It was more of like a scrape.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't as deep as the other two. So
It was like a scrape, almost like a scratch.
I didn't see any like fingernail scratches. It looked more like a sharp object scratch.
What's previously been marked is exhibit number 31. That's the back of the shirt. Is there any cut mark at the bottom?
Could you just bring it over here for me, sir?
May I approach you?
You certainly may.
I can't see anything from that angle, no.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 30, the back of the shirt. May I approach?
You may.
See any cuts at the bottom of that t-shirt?
No, sir. No, sir.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Any redirect?
Just one question. Trooper, when you received those particular shirts from the hospital, they weren't in the manner in which they're presented in those two exhibits, correct?
Correct.
And did you take it out and inspect the shirts to determine where the cut marks or if there were any cut marks on those items?
No, I'll leave that to the chemist.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Nothing further.
The witness may step down. The Commonwealth may call its next witness.
The Commonwealth would call Peter Bankston to the stand, please.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give before the jury in the matter now from Commonwealth and defendant bar from the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. You may proceed.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please tell the jurors your first and last name and spell your last name for the record?
Yes, my name is Peter Bankson, and it's spelled BENGTSON.
And how are you employed, sir?
I'm employed with the Massachusetts State Police.
And what's your current assignment with the state police?
I'm a lieutenant and executive officer of the Crime Scene Services section based out of Maynard.
How long have you been with the state police?
I've been with Massachusetts State Police almost 23 years now,
And how long have you been with the crime scene services section?
15 of those years.
Do you have to undergo any sort of specialized training to be a member of the crime scene services section as a trooper?
Yes. Upon being selected for Crime Scene Services, an application process for this unit, you're assigned a initial 4-month training that's mostly handled with in-house training officers, as well as readings, competency tests and practicals to show that you're proficient within the discipline of crime scene response in processing. Upon completion of that, you're now authorized to respond to crime scenes, and you can start attending scenes that we typically go to: unattended deaths, homicides, things like that. There are other disciplines within crime scene, such as fingerprint comparison, impression comparison of tire tracks in footwear, which requires a continuation of training throughout to get authorization to do comparative analysis within those disciplines. So under the Massachusetts State Police Lab, which is accredited, we're required to go through processes for all these, and our training is ongoing throughout our whole career. Even though we might get these authorizations completed at a certain time frame, we're required each year to complete training. My 15 years, I've done well over 1,000 hours of in-class training.
And so the training that you do in the different disciplines that you learn about as a crime scene services trooper, how does that translate into real world work when you respond to a crime scene? What kinds of things do you guys do at crime scenes?
So crime scene services, our basic responsibility is responding to scene and acting as a support service for the investigative arm of law enforcement agencies. So the state police, local law enforcement, as well as sometimes even federal law enforcement, we can work with them. And our responsibility there is to document the scene with digital photographs, possibly video the scene, process the scene for impression evidence such as fingerprints, footwear track, and tire track impression evidence to capture that for potential further analysis for an identification down the road.
And when a member of the crime scene services section is called out to a scene, are there usually just is there one trooper usually called out, or are multiple troopers called out?
Depending on the significance of the scene. Our typical call out is just a death investigation that may or may not be suspicious. That might be one trooper. However, if there's circumstances that suggest that this is the taking of a life by another, a homicide, additional troopers will be assigned to take on various roles. So usually it's 3 to 4, depending again on the type of scene, the amount of scenes, location of the scene. As we understand the amount of evidence available, we'll adjust appropriately. But some, in general, I'd say 3 to 4 will respond to a typical residential in-house homicide.
And the members of the crime scene services section are generally sworn troopers with the Massachusetts State Police. Is that fair to say?
For crime scene services section, yes. However, there are civilian components such as the crime scene response unit that handles the biological evidence. So there are additional people that may come if it's a scene involving ballistics or firearms. The firearms identification would also assist us, and we're all under the same umbrella of the Massachusetts State Police Lab.
And as far as the crime scene response unit, you mentioned that those individuals are generally civilians or scientists, correct?
Yes, they're trained scientists, usually in biology or chemistry background.
And do you and the other troopers in the crime scene services section work in connection with the response team personnel when processing crime scenes?
Yes, we'll work hand in hand and decipher the scene and decide how they appropriately approach a scene and capture the most evidence available.
And currently you are identified as kind of a supervisor in the crime scene services section. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that would be fair.
how does your role as a supervisor differ from some of the other troopers in the section?
Well, at the time of this investigation, I was a sergeant. I was more of what we call a first line supervisor, where I have really hands-on direct supervision over the analysts working a scene, and making decisions on how to approach a scene, things like that. Now as a lieutenant, more administrative. However, I still respond to scenes. I mentioned that the lab is accredited. I have a vast amount of my work is working with the civilian component of the lab to ensure that the lab is following the standardization that accreditation requires. In other words, following the set rules of
We were way past the scope of the question, and now we're just accrediting things.
All right. I think it's cumulative of testimony that we've already heard. You can move on.
Lieutenant Bankston, I'm going to draw your attention to January 28th, 2021.
Yes,
Do you recall responding to Marshfield on that particular evening?
I do.
And you indicated at that time you were a sergeant.
Yes,
Do you recall being called out to 679 Moraine Street?
I do.
Do you recall what type of location that was?
It was a residential home in a residential area.
Were there other law enforcement already on scene when you and your team arrived?
Yes,
Fair to say members of the Massachusetts State Police Detectives Unit as well as the Marshfield Police Department were already on scene?
that would be correct, yes.
And to your knowledge, had the scene been secured before the crime scene services arrived?
Yes.
And who was working with you as far as members of the crime scene services section and the response team on that particular evening?
I had Trooper Tom Loughran, Trooper William Watson, and chemist or forensic scientist Amy Joy.
And what was your role that evening on scene?
My role was to just supervise the actual process of processing the scene.
And as far as Trooper Watson, what was his role that night?
Trooper Watson, I believe, did a diagram as well as videotaped the scene.
How about Trooper Loughran?
I believe Trooper Loughran was the case officer where he photographed the scene.
And you mentioned Amy Joy was the forensic scientist, correct?
Yes, so she'd be working on biologicals from the scene.
Now, did you do anything substantive as it pertains to processing this particular crime scene?
Yes.
Well, let me ask you first. When you entered into the home, did you make observations of the areas of interest to the crime scene services section inside this home?
Yes, I did.
And fair to say there were two main areas that were the focus of processing. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Well, what were the areas that were the focus of processing in your?
I would call it the kind of living room, dining room area, as well as the threshold to the kitchen areas where we spent most of our time.
And did you make observations of particular items on scene that were significant to the processing of that scene?
Yes.
And I'm just going to show you, it's already been marked with exhibit number 12 on the screen. Can you see exhibit number 12 on the screen?
Yes, I can.
And that's marked by a placard, correct?
Yes.
And does the placard indicate something of significance?
It allows us to keep a tracking of items that we find potential evidentiary value in, which allows us to log and collect in a proper manner.
Did you make observations of that knife on the night of January 28, 2021?
Yes.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 13, placard number 2. Did you make observations of that particular item as well?
Yes.
And what particular item in that box was observed as potentially relevant or significant?
The larger knife on top, I observed that there was some type of substance on the tip that seemed unusual. It didn't look clean. I referred to it as like a gel-like substance.
Now, having made observations of those knives on scene, did you observe any red-brown stains consistent with something like blood?
There were very few. I believe there's some clothing items that may have had some red-brown stains on them, if I remember correctly.
Okay. As far as the area where placard number 1 was placed, the knife on the floor, did you make any observations of red brown stains in that particular area?
I did not see anything that I would have considered red brownish.
And based on the information that you were kind of learning as you are at the scene, processing the scene, did the information that you learned result in you conducting a particular type of test on scene?
Yes.
And what kind of test did you perform?
I used a chemical called leucocrystal-violet. This is a chemical that can react with the hemoglobin portion of blood. And the purpose of it is to bring out areas that might not be visible to the human eye for some reason with blood being present, whether there's just so little of it or it's been worn off on a shoe over a course of time and it's not showing up. And this chemical will turn the blood impression, if there is one, a dark purple against the background, making it visible to the human eye.
Okay, and is this a chemical that you are trained to use on crime scenes?
Yes.
And how do you use it when you're out at a crime scene? What do you do with it?
It's a chemical that we actually mix on scene. It comes in 3 parts. Once it's mixed, it's in a liquid form that we can spray a mist over the area of interest, of potential interest. It goes on in a light manner, and within a very short time, if that hemoglobin hem component of blood is available, we'll see a reaction to that dark purple, giving us the type of evidence to see if there's some type of fingerprint or footwear impression within that area.
And when that substance reacts with the hemoglobin, does that become then visible to you as the investigator?
Yes.
And you said that oftentimes you're looking for potential for footwear, fingerprints in what's illuminated.
Yes.
Are there any limitations of this type of testing when you're using it on an active crime scene?
The limitations, the purpose that we use it for is to find potential comparative evidence. There potentially are some other types of evidence or types of things that it could react to, but they're fairly limited. Sometimes animal blood you might react to with it or things like that. So there's just an awareness. But our purpose is not to call it blood or anything like that. Our purpose is to see the impression that it may have been left behind, whether it's a fingerprint, a footwear impression, or a tire track impression. Obviously, this is in the house. It's not going to be a tire track impression, but we're looking for an impression evidence that might have comparative value.
And where in the house of 679 Marine Street did you use this LCV chemical?
I concentrated on the location of that placard one where there was a steak knife in what I would call the threshold to the kitchen. It encompassed both a kind of a wood floor, a laminate floor, as well as a carpet within the living room.
And in those areas, did you observe any visible red-brown stains?
No, I did not.
And when you applied the chemical, did you observe any non-visible reactions?
I didn't have any reactions, so I didn't see any type of reaction that would suggest some type of impression from blood.
And are those the only areas of the household that you tested, the area placard number 1 in the threshold with this chemical?
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Cross-exam. I'm going to have to end in the next natural break, by the way.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, counsel.
You said that the person from the lab that was helping to collect the samples, one of the people was Amy Joy?
Yes.
Does she still work with your lab?
No, she does not.
Okay. The area near where placard number 1 was,
yes,
where that knife was laying on the floor, that's right next to, as you called it, the threshold to the kitchen.
Yes.
Do you remember that the threshold to the kitchen had like essentially 2 steps, 1 step, and then sort of 1 step further onto the threshold?
I know it was elevated. I can't remember if it's 1 or 2.
Okay.
It was elevated.
About a foot drop, right?
I would say that, yes.
Okay. Now, you talked about blood and hemoglobin that might not be visible to the human eye, correct?
Correct.
That's called occult blood?
Yes.
And in this case, when you put the reagent on it to see if there was any hemoglobin, there wasn't any.
No, there was not.
Okay. And the only problem with that reagent is sometimes there are false positives, as you suggested.
There could be, yes.
Yeah, but you don't normally have problems with false negatives.
We don't because we're not looking as at blood.
Right.
I'm looking for an impression.
So it's a very broad test. It's actually more sensitive in many ways than the more specific tests that you do later on to determine if it's human blood, determine whose human blood it is. This is just a very broad test to determine if there's any hemoglobin molecules that can be picked up, correct?
I don't know if I describe it that way. Again, it's for our purposes. I'm not concerned about what type of blood or DNA or anything like that. So as far as it being broad, it's a fairly limited thing that it will react positively to. So I don't think I'd describe it as broad, but it's not specific as to, as we talked about, the type of blood or whose blood it is.
But it casts a broader net certainly than the more specific test for human blood and the more specific test for a particular human's blood.
That's not the purpose of the test, though. So
Right.
I can't say that it's broad for that, as that being the connection of saying what type of blood it is.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
I guess my point is that you put this reagent down to find all the places where there is potential blood for further testing.
Yes.
Right. And you understand that in some cases that will capture things that ultimately are determined not to be human blood.
It could, yes.
So in other words, it captures a broader class of things than what subsequent tests do that narrows it down further.
You could characterize it that way.
Thank you.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, that's a good point for me to pause. They're going to go on lunch fairly soon. What we'll do is catch up from here. I'll leave it paused. Catch up from here to current. So we might have to speed through a bit, but then at least we don't have to listen to the beeps anyway. So I will see you later. It might be a case of like I put the stream up and we go straight because I don't know what time I'll be back. And I think they finish at like 10 o'clock my time. So if we don't get through whatever we speed through tonight, then we'll just start early tomorrow, catch up and carry on. Okay, see you later. Bye.